Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Thanks for joining me again tonight. If you enjoy the stories in this video, please give it a like, and if you've had any unexplained paranormal experience of your own, feel free to send it to me. The first story tonight is about Keith, Diana, and their daughter Raven, who moved into a quiet home surrounded by woods. At first, everything seemed normal, but soon, Diana started feeling like something was watching the house. Settle in, and I hope you have a good night's sleep. You know, sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest fears. Let me tell you about Keith and Diana, two high school sweethearts from a sleepy little town in Ohio. They had that kind of love story that just grows naturally. The kind that makes you believe in forever. After they tied the knot, they dreamed of a home where nature was their closest neighbor, a place where their daughter, little Raven, could grow up surrounded by trees and the whispering woods. About 6 years into their marriage, they found it. A beautiful, secluded house tucked away inside a dense forest back in their hometown. Keith, a hunter with a steady hand, and Diana, someone who found peace in the forest's embrace, were both thrilled. So, off they went, moving into this inviting yet isolated house, with Raven, their cheerful 4-year-old, bringing life to the quiet woods. Now, Keith worked long days as a welder and spent his nights at school, chasing a dream of an apprenticeship. This meant Diana and Raven were often alone during those weeknights. The first couple of weeks were calm, but Diana would sometimes catch faint scampering sounds around the house. She'd pause whatever she was doing, her heart quickening just a little, and peek through the window. Each time, though, she found nothing. No animals, no people, just shadows and the rustling of leaves. She chalked it up to small forest animals wandering close to the house, nothing to worry about. One night, after tucking Raven into bed, Diana was doing the dishes when she heard that familiar scampering. She moved to the window and pressed her forehead against the glass, squinting into the darkness. And there, staring back at her, were 2 golden eyes. She thought, "Must be a dog," and told herself she'd handle it in the morning. As she finished the dishes, she started tidying the living room. Curiosity nudged her to check again. She peeked through the living room window and saw nothing at first. But then, as she was about to pull away, those golden eyes appeared again. This time, they seemed to belong to something much taller, looming just beyond the glass. A chill ran down her spine. Blinking hard, she convinced herself it was just a trick of the light, maybe a tall dog with reflective eyes. Still unsettled, Diana moved back to the kitchen window, the one that faced the tree line about 20 feet away. She peered out, waiting. Slowly, a human-like head with golden eyes emerged, watching her intently. Panic gripped her chest. She stepped back, heart pounding, when suddenly, the hum of a car engine filled the driveway. Keith was home. She sank to the floor, relief washing over her as he unlocked the door. Between shaky breaths, she told him everything. Keith, protective and skeptical, rushed outside, flashlight in hand, searching every inch of their property. But there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone lurking. He returned inside and gently told Diana it was probably her imagination, that maybe the isolation was getting to her. "Could just be an animal," he said, trying to comfort her. Then, about a month later, Diana was alone again with Raven. The house felt quieter, almost too quiet. She was in the kitchen doing dishes, gazing outside when those golden eyes appeared once more, slowly rising from the edge of the window. She froze, then backed away, a wave of dread crashing over her. She ran through the house, flipping off every light, heart hammering in her chest. Finally, she switched off the living room lights. The reflections vanished, and there, standing just outside, was a tall, shadowy figure with glowing eyes. She didn't hesitate. She called 911. But by the time the police arrived, the figure was gone. They searched the grounds thoroughly but found no traces of anyone. Keith arrived as well, and though he was angry and worried, he scolded Diana for calling the cops without reason. Still, the officers advised her to call if anything else happened, leaving the couple with no answers but plenty of unease. 4 months passed with no new incidents, and life started to feel normal again. Then one cold morning, Keith decided to surprise his family with donuts. He started his car, letting it warm up in the chilly air. As he adjusted the rearview mirror, he spotted someone standing right behind his car. Heart racing, he jumped out and searched everywhere, but the woods held only silence. No one was there. What caught his attention next were the footprints. Massive prints, nearly 14 inches long, scattered across their property. They started and ended right at their home, as if whatever was out there was stalking them but never leaving the boundary. That morning, Keith finally understood what Diana had been feeling all along. They weren't alone in those woods. Something was watching, waiting, stalking. And it wasn't just an animal. It was something else. Something mysterious and deeply unsettling, hidden behind those golden eyes in the forest. Hey there, I want to share with you 2 chilling tales that have stayed with me for a long time. Stories that weave together love, mystery, and the eerie unknown. So, grab a cozy spot and let me take you through these haunting narratives. First, let me tell you about a couple named Tom Hawkins and his wife Jaki. Now, Tom was a 39-year-old father to 2 teenage boys, and he met Jaki back in 1986. Jaki was stunningly beautiful, and despite a tragic accident earlier in her life that left her unable to have children, she embraced Tom's boys as her own. They fell madly in love, and by 1989, they tied the knot surrounded by 150 of their closest friends and family. Jaki moved in with Tom and his sons, and over time, this blended family grew tight-knit and happy. The house was filled with laughter and warmth, the kind only found in a family that truly loves each other. When their sons grew up and moved out to start their own lives, Tom and Jaki thought it was the perfect time to embark on a new adventure together, a retirement filled with freedom and the open sea. They pooled their savings and bought a yacht. It wasn't a luxury vessel by any means, but they adored it and christened it Well Deserved. For 2 years, they sailed the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of California, soaking in the sun, the salt air, and each other's company. Then came wonderful news. One of their sons was expecting a baby. Jaki was overjoyed at the thought of becoming a grandmother and wanted to be close to her expanding family. So, in 2004, they decided to dock the yacht and move to Newport Harbor to live near their son. They put up an ad to sell Well Deserved, and that's when the story takes a darker turn. In November that year, a young couple named Jennifer and Skylar DeLeon responded to the ad and quickly finalized the purchase. Tom and Jaki told their sons about the sale and promised to keep in touch. But days passed, and the sons heard nothing from their parents, something very out of character for the usually attentive couple. Concerned, they reached out to their Uncle Jim, a retired police chief. Jim, a no-nonsense man with a keen eye for detail, drove down to Newport Beach with a friend to check on things. When he found Well Deserved moored at the dock, he stepped aboard and immediately noticed that the yacht was in disarray. Inside, everything was a mess, far from the orderly, tidy state Tom and Jaki would have kept it. This confirmed to Jim that the yacht was indeed sold. Before leaving, Jim left a note for the new owners, asking them to contact him since the previous owners were missing. Almost immediately, he received a call from Jennifer DeLeon, a 21-year-old woman who explained that she and her husband had bought the yacht. Like Jim, they were trying to reach Tom and Jaki, but to no avail. Jennifer mentioned some controls on the yacht she didn't understand, and had tried contacting Tom to help her out, but he was nowhere to be found. She also said there were personal belongings of Tom and Jaki left in the drawers, which she wanted to return. When Jim asked her when she last saw them, Jennifer said it was the day they sold the yacht. She recalled Tom and Jaki receiving the payment, hopping into their car, and driving away. Jaki had even told her they planned to buy a house in Mexico and settle there. Jim thanked Jennifer and asked her to keep him updated. But something nagged at Jim's mind. He remembered a woman named Patricia who had been managing Tom and Jaki's finances for the past 2 years. Because of poor connectivity at sea, they had hired Patricia, a family friend, to handle their bills and taxes. Jim reached out to Patricia, who denied knowing anything about their whereabouts. When Jim asked if a large sum of money had been deposited recently, Patricia said no. Nothing had come through. This was strange because Tom and Jaki were supposed to have $500,000 in their account. With no logical explanation, Jim reported them missing to the Newport Beach police. Police began investigating and quickly found that Skylar DeLeon, the man who bought the yacht, had a criminal record for armed robbery. Naturally, suspicion grew around him. They brought Skylar in for questioning. Surprisingly, he was cooperative. He told the police that he had purchased the yacht legally in front of a notary and a friend who witnessed the deal. Like Jennifer, he claimed Tom and Jaki drove away after the sale. When asked about his finances, Skylar initially claimed he had saved money from his days as a child star on the Power Rangers. But moments later, he confessed the truth, that he had stolen money from a drug kingpin, which led to his conviction. After prison, he needed to launder the money, and buying the yacht was part of that plan. Because of his honesty and cooperation, the police let him go without charges for money laundering. The police interviewed everyone who had seen Tom and Jaki last, but their stories matched Skylar's. The investigation hit a dead end. Missing person notices were posted, showing Tom's SUV. Then, a tip came in from Mexico. A woman reported seeing the SUV parked at a house on her street. Police rushed over, hoping to find Tom and Jaki, but discovered it was Skylar who had parked it there, not the missing couple. The police reopened their inquiry, questioning Skylar and Jennifer again. When they dug into the notary and Skylar's friend Alonzo, the picture became clearer. The notary, Kathleen, confessed she didn't know Tom or Jaki and had been paid by Skylar to forge the documents. Alonzo initially stuck to Skylar's story, but eventually cracked when offered leniency. What they uncovered was chilling. Skylar had seen the yacht ad, and with his friends Alonzo and John, he showed up for a sea trial. Tom, a seasoned probation officer, immediately sensed something was wrong and tried to avoid the trial. To ease tensions, Skylar called Jennifer, who arrived with their baby. Jaki warmed up to Jennifer and the baby, and the family agreed to the sea trial. As they prepared to set sail, Jennifer left the boat, saying the baby wasn't comfortable with the sea. Moments later, Tom and Jaki realized the group's true intentions. Skylar and his men handcuffed them, gagged them, and forced them to sign over the yacht. Jaki cleverly made a mistake in her signature. They locked Tom and Jaki in a room and took the yacht to the deepest part of the ocean. At the rear of the boat, Skylar ordered Alonzo to bring the anchor. Tom and Jaki understood the horror unfolding. Fueled by adrenaline, Tom broke free and struck Skylar in the groin, but John quickly subdued them, linking their handcuffs together. With chilling cruelty, Skylar chained their handcuffs to the anchor and threw it overboard. As the anchor sank, it dragged Tom and Jaki beneath the waves. Jaki's head struck the boat, the sickening crack echoing as Alonzo heard it. Their bodies disappeared into the dark depths. Skylar and Jennifer showed no mercy. They returned to the dock and, without a shred of remorse, began using Tom and Jaki's camera to record their own memories, leaving the previous footage untouched, as if mocking the vanished couple. It's a story that still sends shivers down my spine. The cold-blooded betrayal, the ocean's silent grave, and the haunting truth hidden beneath the waves. Now, let me take you far away, back to the 1920s in southern Germany, to a remote farmstead called Hinterkaifeck. The Gruber family lived there. Andreas, his wife Tizilia, their daughter Victoria, Victoria's 2 children, and their live-in maid. The farm was isolated, surrounded by dense forests and silence, except for the whispers of the wind and the creaks of the old wooden house. One winter in 1921, the maid began noticing strange things. While cleaning, she heard tapping sounds, not from the other side of the wall, but inside the wall itself. It was as if the house itself was alive, whispering secrets. Then came footsteps and faint voices from the attic. Terrified, she told Andreas, who searched the attic but found nothing. No hiding places, no one there. Yet the sounds persisted. Night after night, the maid woke from sleep, disturbed by these eerie noises. After weeks of fear, she quit, saying the house was haunted. Without the maid, the family felt vulnerable. Soon, even Andreas heard the tapping and footsteps. His family thought he was imagining things, but soon they heard it too. They searched the property desperately for an intruder, but found nothing. Then, the strange happenings escalated. Items went missing. Most frustratingly, the house keys vanished and reappeared in odd places. One night, Victoria's grandchild went missing. The family searched the house and surrounding forest, only to find her lost and confused near the house, unable to explain how she got there. Adding to the mystery, a newspaper that no one subscribed to appeared on their table. The lock on their expensive toolbox was found with deep cut marks, as if someone had tried to break in silently. In March 1922, after a heavy snowstorm, Andreas found footprints leading to the house, but none leading away, like someone had come but never left. He told a neighbor and declined their offer for a rifle, perhaps hoping for peace. On March 4th, a repairman arrived for an appointment. He knocked, but no one answered, though he heard appliances running and dogs barking. He tried to get their attention through windows, but was met with silence. The house was locked tight. Concerned, the neighbor checked on the Grubers, found the barn open, and called out. There, in the dim light, lay Andreas's lifeless body. What investigators later pieced together was horrifying. One by one, the family members were lured to the barn, bludgeoned to death with a mattock, their bodies hidden under hay. No resistance, no struggle. The killer then moved into the house, killing the remaining 2 family members, including the children. Even more chilling, the murderer stayed in the house for 5 days, using their food and sleeping in their beds, while the bodies lay undiscovered. Neighbors even saw smoke rising from the chimney during those days. The money in the house was untouched, ruling out robbery as a motive. The Grubers weren't well liked, so finding a suspect was impossible. It was as if the forest itself held its secrets tight. To this day, no one knows who or what was responsible. Was it a human with a dark heart, or something unearthly? The mystery lingers, wrapped in cold German winters and haunted whispers. So, those are the stories of a couple lost to the ocean's depths and a family vanished into the shadows of a lonely farm. They remind us how fragile life is, how darkness can hide behind the most ordinary walls, and how sometimes the past refuses to let go. You know, I've been meaning to tell this story for a while now, but every time I start, it just feels heavy, like the words themselves carry some weight. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share it with you, just as it happened, with all its twists and shadows. I began showing up at Mr. Boland's place 5 days a week, Thursdays through Mondays. It was a routine I stuck to for a little over a month, and honestly, I got pretty comfortable with it. The house was quiet, the air thick with the smell of old wood and something faintly floral, maybe from the garden. But no matter how used to it I got, there was always this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Like the next time I opened that front door, I'd find him sitting up, staring right at me. He never did, but the possibility lingered, like a shadow just beyond the edge of the light. One night, Leslie was running particularly late. The clock had crept past midnight. The house was dark except for the soft glow of a bedside lamp, and I was sitting there, half dozing off with a book in my hands. The pages felt heavy, and my eyelids kept drooping until, suddenly, the book slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. That jolt snapped me awake. I'd missed one of my 30-minute check-ins. I sprang to my feet, heart pounding, and hurried down the hallway. When I reached the door, my hand paused on the bolt. I held my breath, listening. I called out softly, "Mr. Bolin, are you awake?" There was a pause, almost too long, and then a single, heavy footstep. Just one. Not a shuffle or a series of steps, but one solid thud that echoed in the silent house. My skin prickled, and I instinctively reached for my gun. With a trembling hand, I opened the door. And there he was, sleeping, just like always. I blinked, wondering if my mind was playing tricks on me. That night stretched out endlessly. It was creeping toward 2 in the morning, and still, no sign of Leslie. I tried calling her, but there was only silence. No answer on her cell, no response from her office phone. I thought about reaching out to her husband, but something held me back. Instead, I stayed, trying to keep my focus, doing my job. At 2:30, I got up again for another check. My hand hovered over the door, and then something brushed against my face. I swatted it away, thinking it was another pesky fruit fly. But then I felt something small and cool on my hand, a tiny blue leaf. When I looked up, the dried 4-leaf clover pinned above the doorframe had turned completely blue, as if soaked by some unseen dye. I hesitated, then slid the bolt and pushed the door open, but it stopped abruptly against something heavy. I pushed again, and again. Slowly, the door creaked open, and I realized it was the closet. But how in the world had Mr. Bolin moved that heavy old piece of furniture without me hearing? "Mr. Bolin," I called out, my voice shaking. "I'm coming in." Step by step, I eased the door wider. Through the narrow crack, I saw his bed, empty. The roses on the bedside table had all turned blue, their leaves strewn across the floor like crushed petals underfoot. Summoning every ounce of courage, I shoved the door open. There he was, standing in front of the metal sheet covering the window. A loud pop echoed as one of the corner screws tore free. The ceiling fan was silent now. The usual hum was gone. The lights flickered and died, and shards of glass glistened across the bedspread. "Mr. Bolin? I started, but he didn't respond. His arms hung loosely at his sides, but the metal sheet kept shifting, held by something unseen. Then he turned toward me. His face stretched unnaturally, as if pulled tight by invisible strings. From his mouth emerged something thick and slick, dark as oil, as wide as my arm and twice as long. It dripped onto the floor, leaving eerie blue stains in its wake. It looked like an arm, or maybe a tentacle. Before I could even react, the appendage split into 4. One grabbed the mirror, another the bed, and 2 clung to the ceiling. Like some grotesque puppeteer, it swung Mr. Bolin forward and back in a macabre dance. It was terrifyingly fast, all of it moving toward me. I fumbled for my gun, but before I could draw it, he was at the door. I stumbled backward as the tentacles reached through the narrow opening, only to be stopped by his frail body. It reminded me of a snail struggling to escape its shell, or a snake writhing in captivity. And then, in the depths of his wide-open mouth, I saw it, a flash of white, like a gleaming eye, or a row of teeth. I felt my pulse skyrocket, drumming in my ears, breath catching in my throat. I barely noticed I was forgetting to breathe. I finally got my gun out, safety off, and steadied myself to fire. But at what? What exactly was my target? That moment of hesitation was all the creature needed to close the distance. It lunged, hurling Mr. Bolin like a rag doll across the room. Bottles clattered to the floor, and the creature slipped on the carpet, scrambling to regain its footing. It was between me and the exit now. Without thinking, I dashed upstairs, the sound of sticky smacks behind me as the tentacles scrambled in pursuit. There was something almost eager about it, like it was playing a cruel game or hunting a meal. Reaching the top, I fired a shot. I wasn't aiming, I just needed to keep it at bay. The bang echoed loudly, and I thought I hit something, but nothing changed. I slammed the bathroom door shut and pressed my back against it. Outside, I heard a wet, squelching noise. Tiny tentacles probing under and over the frame, scraping to pry the door loose. The wood groaned under the strain. Panicking, I scrambled to the window. Knocking over soaps and delicate figurines, I climbed out, only to feel a sudden tug on my leg. I didn't look back, but the biting smell of ammonia filled the air. And then, in the midst of that terror, a voice, quiet, faint, but unmistakably real. Deep inside Mr. Bolin, it whispered, "Hello." Something tried to pull me back. I clung to the window frame with every ounce of strength. My shoe slipped off, and with a final desperate effort, I fell from the second-story window, landing hard on the garage roof. The steel dented beneath me as I tumbled off, finally lying flat on the gravel path, gasping for breath. My shoulder ached, and my head throbbed, but adrenaline kept the pain at bay. I stumbled toward my car, flung the door open, and slammed the key into the ignition. The headlights flicked on, and there, just in front of my car, was Mr. Bolin. At least 6 tentacles held him up, his form shifting like a grotesque crab standing in the driveway. His eyes flickered wildly, as if trapped in some nightmarish dream. I hit reverse, and that's when I realized I was screaming. Not consciously, but from the very depths of my soul. I didn't stop. I just drove, desperate to put miles between myself and that cursed house. I don't know if it chased me or let me go. That night blurred into a nightmare I can hardly recall. The next day, I found myself 2 towns over. Barefoot on my left foot, I stopped at a gas station and borrowed a phone. I must have dropped mine during the chaos. I still couldn't reach Leslie, and for a moment, I felt utter lost. The whole ordeal felt unreal, like a waking nightmare. Later that day, as I was driving back, I heard it on the news. Leslie Bolin was missing. I said nothing about what happened. The job Leslie had given me was off the books, paid quietly, and I didn't want to risk ever going near that house again. Besides, what if I had shot Mr. Bolin that night? What if it was all a hallucination? It would have been easier to believe it was just my mind playing tricks, but deep down, I knew the truth. Not long after, reports came in that Leslie had been found dead. I have my suspicions about what really happened to her, and I'm certain it has something to do with that blue hour at Mr. Bolin's house, a time when reality twisted and something dark came crawling out from the shadows. I've wanted to talk about this for a long time, but I never really knew how. Part of me still feels strange even saying it out loud, because I don't have any proof of it now. It happened when I was little, and for years I kept it to myself because I was scared people would think I was making it up. I was about 8 when it started. For a while, maybe a month or so, I had sleep paralysis almost every night. Of course, I didn't know that's what it was back then. I just thought I was having these terrible nightmares where I couldn't move. At first, I would wake my parents up whenever it happened. But after a few nights, I started feeling bad about it, like I was being annoying. So I stopped calling for them and just dealt with it alone. After a while, I started dreading bedtime completely. I shared a room with my brother, and my bed was set up in a way where a tall dresser partly blocked the view of the door. Every time it happened, I saw the same man. Sometimes I'd see the bedroom door slowly opening. Other times, he was already there, standing just inside the room near the dresser. I could never see his face clearly. The room was too dark for that, but I could see the outline of him. His hair looked flat or very short, nothing sticking out, and he would move slowly around the dresser until he was beside my bed. He never touched me. He never climbed onto the bed. He just stood there, facing me, like he was watching. Some nights he stayed near the foot of the bed. Other nights, he came closer. Something I only realized years later is that every time this happened, my bedroom door was open. I don't remember leaving it open. I just remember waking up and seeing it that way. Sometimes I would eventually fall back asleep, but even then, I had this awful feeling, almost like someone was breathing near my face. I honestly don't know if that was real or if I was just scared and half asleep. I never told anyone in the morning. Around that same time, I used to explore the house a lot. I was always opening drawers, checking cupboards, looking in places I probably wasn't supposed to. In the bathroom, we had one of those mirrored medicine cabinets. One day, I got this really strong urge to look on top of it. I don't know why. It wasn't a place I normally checked, but suddenly, I felt like I had to. There were a few normal things up there, like folded cloths and old toiletries, but there was also a key. It was an old metal key, the kind you'd expect to see in a very old house. Big, heavy-looking, almost like a skeleton key. The strange thing was, nothing in our house used a key like that. Our doors either had modern keys or no keyholes at all. Even my bedroom door didn't have a keyhole. Right across from my room, in the hallway ceiling, there was an attic hatch. Nobody ever went up there. We didn't store boxes there. We didn't use it for anything. It was just there. When I looked up at it that day, I noticed it wasn't shut all the way. It was open just a little. I remember feeling terrified. Not curious, not confused, just scared in a way I couldn't explain. I didn't say anything to anyone. I put the key back exactly where I found it. Later that day, I thought about telling my brother. I trusted him more than anyone, but I was already asking him almost every night to check near the bedroom door before we went to sleep, just to make sure nobody was standing there. I didn't want to bother him with one more thing. That night, it happened again. Same room, same paralysis, same man. The next day, I went back to look for the key. It was gone. I hadn't told anyone about it. No one should have known I'd found it. That was when it stopped feeling like a nightmare to me. There's another part of this that I didn't really understand until I got older. My father and I didn't have the easiest relationship. When I was little, he would sometimes say things that made it sound like I was connected to things I didn't understand. He never explained it clearly. It was always vague, almost hidden in the way he spoke. And whenever I mentioned anything spiritual or paranormal, he'd look at me differently. Not surprised exactly. More like I'd accidentally said something he already knew. The last night it happened is the part I still think about the most. I had sleep paralysis again, and afterward I finally managed to move. Usually, if I woke up in the middle of the night, I would never leave the room. I hated walking into the hallway. It always felt wrong somehow. But that night, I really had to use the bathroom. I remember sitting there for a moment, trying to convince myself I was only scared because of the sleep paralysis. I told myself to just get up, go quickly, and come back. So I got out of bed and walked past the dresser. My heart was pounding so hard that even now, just remembering it, I can almost feel it again. I opened the bedroom door and looked toward the attic hatch, like I always did. From where I was standing, I couldn't tell if it was open or closed. Then I turned toward the hallway. That's when I saw the top of his head, then his eyes. It was the same man, standing at the top of the stairs. The second we looked at each other, he stood up fully and started running toward me. I ran straight into the bathroom, locked the door, and stayed there for the rest of the night. In the morning, my mother knocked because she needed to get ready. She asked why I had slept in the bathroom. I didn't tell her. I couldn't. After that night, the sleep paralysis stopped completely. I never saw him again. Years passed. The house changed. There were renovations, furniture got moved, and that old medicine cabinet was eventually thrown out. So there's no real way to recreate how everything looked back then. But I still think about the key. When I finally asked my mother about it years later, she said we had never owned any key like that. When I was around 15, my father told me something I hadn't known before. He admitted that he had practiced spiritism. He said he had experienced things he described as short visits to other places, almost like other layers of reality. He also told me about the man who had introduced him to all of it. According to my father, that man had been deeply involved in spiritism for years. Then one seance went badly, and the next day, the man took his own life. My father never wanted to talk about it again after that. Even now, he still meditates and does certain rituals. He says they help protect his mind and keep him balanced. My mother is a very rational person, so I never expected her to have stories like this. But she once told me about something her own mother claimed to have seen back in Portugal. My grandmother was very religious, and she said that when she was younger, she saw a friend become possessed. She described the person's body twisting in ways that didn't look natural, and said they started speaking words nobody understood. Then, when I was 16 or 17, my closest friend and I tried to communicate with a spirit. I know how that sounds. But he had also experienced strange things in his own house, and at the time, we were both trying to understand what any of it meant. I won't go through every detail, but I remember the air turning freezing cold only around the empty chair beside us. The candle moved at certain moments, almost like it was answering questions. He also had a device that was supposed to pick up words connected to a spirit's presence, and the words we got seemed to point to a soldier looking for someone. I don't know if any of these things are connected. I don't even know what I believe about all of it. But when I put the memories together, the man in my room, the key, the attic hatch, my father's past, it still unsettles me in a way I've never been able to explain. So I want to give you a little bit of background first. My partner and I both read tarot. I'm usually the skeptical one. I question everything, probably more than I should. He's the opposite in some ways, because he's had more than one experience with spirits, so he's a lot more open to things right away. But even though I'm critical, I trust my cards. They've never steered me wrong, not in personal readings, and not when I've read for other people. About a year ago, my parents and my little sister moved away from the coast and into a quieter place farther inland. My partner and I moved to the same area a few months later. And last week, my sister finally told me something she'd been keeping to herself. She said she's been hearing my mom's voice calling her at night. The first time it happened, it sounded like it came from my mom's bedroom. She heard, "Shelby, come here," in this bright, cheerful voice. So she got up and checked, but my mom was completely asleep. And it didn't stop after that. For almost a year, she's heard that voice coming from different places in the house. The kitchen, the hallway, right outside her bedroom door. One time, it woke her up, and she said it sounded like it was right over her shoulder. It usually only says it once, always the same kind of cheerful tone. "Shelby, come here." I hadn't gone over to that house until they'd already been living there for a couple of months. And after I visited for the first time, she started hearing my voice too. Not often, but sometimes. Mine would just say her name, Shelby, but in a flat, plain tone. No emotion behind it. My dad is very religious, but he does believe in ghosts because he's had his own experiences before. At first, he kind of brushed it off, like maybe she was dreaming or half awake. But eventually, even he started feeling like something in that house wasn't right. One night, everyone else was asleep, and he was in the living room playing video games like he usually does. Out of nowhere, the automatic trash can opened. He ignored it at first. Then it opened again, and again. It would open for about a minute, close for about a minute, then open again. Finally, he got up, and it stopped immediately. Later, my sister and I noticed something strange. If you peeked around the wall at my dad while he was sitting in his recliner, then hit again, the trash can would open. When you looked again, it would close. A couple of days ago, my sister was home alone in the middle of the day. Bright daylight. Nothing spooky about the time at all. Then the robot vacuum turned on by itself. It did one full loop around the room, then docked itself again. The weird part is, they haven't used that vacuum since they moved in. My sister was sitting in the same room when it happened, and she told me the sound was so loud that at first she thought a plane was passing over the house. It didn't even make its usual little startup sound. It was just this sudden, heavy roar. So, at my sister's request, my partner and I went over with my cards. He drew a protective circle, lit a candle, and I started the reading. The first thing I asked was what this spirit, or whatever it is, was like. I pulled the King of Swords reversed. That card made my stomach drop. To me, that pointed towards something cruel, manipulative, controlling, possibly violent. I didn't write down every card after that because, honestly, the whole reading felt wrong. My deck felt scared. I know that might sound strange, but my cards usually come through very clearly. They're confident, sometimes blunt, sometimes almost rude. But this time, they felt hesitant. The message I got was basically, do not mess with this. When I asked if there was more than one spirit in the house, the answer felt like, you don't want to know. The cards also seemed to describe my sister as the fool, not in a bad way, but as someone young, innocent, and unaware of what she's really dealing with. And the strongest feeling I got was that this is beyond me, that I need to be extremely careful. So now I'm genuinely asking, what do you think this thing could be? And more importantly, how do I help my sister stay calm and feel safe in that house? Because my cards have never reacted like this before. They've warned me before, yes. They've been sharp before. But they have never felt afraid. I'm not saying I'm completely convinced this picture is haunted. I'm just saying I don't feel great about being the person who tests that theory. My parents have had this old framed print for as long as I can remember. It belonged to a relative before them, and for years, it was just one of those things in the house that nobody really noticed anymore. It got moved from room to room, then eventually tucked away in storage. Then my brother's wife came over. Out of nowhere, she asked my parents about the little girl she kept seeing in their house. She said there was a young girl who would sit on the couch beside an older Native American man. According to her, the girl seemed like she was trying to say something, but the words never came through clearly. She also said the girl liked hiding near the hallway closet, didn't seem comfortable around men, and would not go anywhere near my parents' bedroom. That already felt strange enough. But then, my mom admitted she had seen the Native American man before too. My sister-in-law had never been told that. No one had mentioned it to her. After that, my mom became convinced the old print was connected to all of it. She took it outside, leaned it against the side of the garage, and placed it near a stack of metal tools because someone had told her metal could trap or contain spirits somehow. I'll be honest, that bothered me. I don't know what I believe. I don't know if anything is attached to that picture. But if there really is a little girl involved, I hated the idea of treating her like some dangerous, evil thing. So I went outside later and turned the picture around so it wasn't facing out toward the yard. I left it where my mom had put it, but I added a few tiny pieces of old dollhouse furniture that had been sitting in a box in the garage. I know that sounds strange, maybe even silly, but in my head, if there was a child connected to it somehow, maybe it would feel less like she had been thrown away. Maybe it would feel a little less lonely. Now I'm wondering if that was the wrong thing to do. My sister-in-law also told us that when she ignores the little girl, she usually has a terrible day afterward. Not just a regular bad day, but one of those days where everything goes wrong from morning to night. Could that be coincidence? Of course, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me think twice. So I'm asking honestly, did I make things worse by touching the picture and putting the dollhouse furniture with it? Should my parents get rid of the print? Throw it away? Donate it? Burn it? Sell it to someone who actually knows about haunted objects? Or should everyone just leave it exactly where it is and never mess with it again? I'm really looking for honest thoughts here. Has anyone dealt with something like this before, especially with an old picture or object that's been in the family for years? Update. After reading through what people said, I'm starting to think maybe it isn't the print itself that's haunted. It might be something using the image of the little girl, because my mom always loved that part of the painting. And that, honestly, makes the whole thing feel worse. My mom has also seen what looked like a full-body version of herself standing in the house. She's seen something with a long, sharp, claw-like finger trying to reach toward her mouth. So when people mentioned the possibility of a mimic, that actually made a disturbing amount of sense. Now the question is, how do we get rid of something like that? Because if it's only pretending to be the little girl, then throwing away the print probably won't make it leave, right? So I'll start with a little background, because I feel like it matters. I'm 24 and I just finished university, so I came home for the summer. While I was studying in another country, my family moved abroad. They've been living there for about 3 years now, but this house is new to us. It's not an old place either, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and the people who own it live right next door. We rent from them, but honestly, we barely ever see them. Because the house is fairly new, and because we're supposedly the first tenants to actually live in it, I didn't think there would be anything strange about it. I also haven't spent much time there, since I've mostly been away at school. A little over a week ago, my parents left to go back to our home country to get our cabin ready. We usually spend a big part of the summer there. My younger sister Mira, who's 17, was supposed to go with them, but she got really sick at the last minute, so she stayed behind with me. Before I get into what happened, I need to explain the basement, because the layout is kind of important. Our basement is weirdly half basement, half ground floor. It's where the main entrance is, but the living room and the main part of the house are upstairs. So we don't really spend time downstairs unless we're leaving, coming home, or grabbing something from storage. There's a door from the basement into the garage, and we usually leave it unlocked because you need a code to get into the garage from outside anyway. The garage also works as a storage area. If you walk all the way to the back, there's this narrow opening, maybe a meter wide, that leads into a little corridor-like space. It's about 4 meters long and also around a meter wide. The garage light is motion activated, which becomes important later. There's also another storage room in the basement with a fridge and freezer for extra food, and a door that leads into the electrical room. Then there's a spare room we turned into an office. It has a couch, a small TV, and an old Wii, but nobody has used it since my parents left. The noises started only a few hours after they drove away. At first, It sounded like someone knocking on the front door. Not a polite little tap either, more like a slow, deliberate knock. I checked the doorbell camera right away, but there was nobody there. No person, no car, nothing. So I told myself it was probably wind, or maybe an animal, or just the house settling. But a few minutes later, I heard another sound. This one came from the garage. It sounded like something heavy had slammed against the garage door. I asked Mira about it after a while, and she didn't seem worried at all. She told me the equipment downstairs sometimes makes strange noises, or maybe a box had fallen in the garage. I decided to believe her, mostly because I know I can jump to creepy explanations too quickly. I used to love paranormal stories, but lately I've been avoiding them. Same with true crime. About a year ago, I listened to a true crime episode while running alone through a forest in the dark, and I scared myself so badly that I've been trying not to feed that part of my brain anymore. But the sounds didn't stop. For the next few days, we kept hearing things from downstairs. Thuds, scraping sounds, little knocks that didn't feel random. One evening, Mira and I were upstairs watching a movie when there was a really loud sound from below us. To me, it sounded exactly like the garage door closing. That heavy, rolling, mechanical sound. Mira immediately said it couldn't be that, because the garage door barely works. It only opens properly maybe 1 time out of 5, unless you use this specific tool my dad keeps down there. But I guess she could see on my face that I wasn't convinced. And because she has absolutely no sense of self-preservation, she suddenly called out, "Hey, is someone there?" There was no answer. Then she added, "We're watching a movie. You can come join us if you want." That's when we heard a small thud. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make my whole body go cold. Mira looked like she wanted to say something else, but I grabbed her arm and told her to stop. I was genuinely scared by then. Not jumpy scared, not silly scared, actually scared. Eventually, she convinced me to let her go downstairs and check the garage. I hated the idea, but she's always been braver than me about this kind of stuff. Or maybe reckless is the better word. She loves scary things. She's the kind of person who would hear a noise in the woods at midnight and walk toward it because she thinks, maybe it's a ghost. But because she wants ghosts and demons to be real so badly, she's also weirdly skeptical. So she went down. I waited upstairs, barely breathing. After a few minutes, I saw her coming back up the stairs. Her eyes looked wide, and her face seemed pale, but the hallway was dim, and I was already terrified, so I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. I asked her, what happened? She said one of the boxes in the garage had fallen over. That was it. Then she sat back on the couch, but this time, she pulled the blanket all the way up to her chin. Usually, she just drapes it over her lap or shoulders. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was just cold. And that made sense, technically, because the basement area is always chilly, and she was only wearing a t-shirt. But something about her felt different. I really think she saw something. I don't know what. I don't know if she's not telling me because she doesn't want to scare me, or because saying it out loud would make it feel too real. Then, over the last couple of days, things got stranger. I could have sworn I heard the fridge in the basement storage room open and close. Not once, but more than once. That soft suction sound when the door opens, then the little rattle when it shuts. I also heard the Wii start up from the office. You know that tiny electronic sound old consoles make when they turn on? I know what I heard. Later, I asked Mira to grab a pack of mochi from the freezer downstairs. We had been saving it. She came back and said, it was gone. But I know neither of us ate it. I know we didn't move it. And this might sound ridiculous, but Mira's dental floss has also been disappearing. At first, We joked that maybe a ghost had really specific oral hygiene needs. It was funny for about 5 seconds. Now I'm not so sure it's a joke. That's everything I can remember right now. I might share an update if anything else happens, or if Mira finally tells me what she saw downstairs. Listen, I know it sounds like the kind of story people tell just to scare children away from broken places. But in Devgud, nobody laughed when someone mentioned the old mansion beyond the cremation ground. They called it Black Manor. It stood at the edge of the village, half swallowed by wild grass and neem trees, with its windows cracked like tired old eyes. People said a landlord named Viraj Singh had lived there almost a century ago with his family. Then, one moonless night, the villagers heard screams coming from the mansion. Not one scream, not two, but a whole house crying out at once. By morning, Viraj Singh and his family were gone. No bodies, no footsteps, nothing. Only strange marks on the walls and dark red stains across the floor. From that day on, the villagers stopped going near Black Manor after sunset. They said the house did not stand empty. They said it waited. Years later, a young man named Aaron came from the city. He was confident, cheerful, the kind of person who smiles when others whisper warnings. When the villagers told him about the mansion, he laughed softly and said, "Ghosts don't frighten me. Tonight, I'll stay there myself." I wish someone had stopped him. At midnight, Aaron walked through the rusted gate with a torch in his hand. The gate opened with a long, painful creak, even though there was no wind. The moment he stepped inside, it slammed shut behind him. Bang! The sound rolled through the courtyard. Inside, everything smelled of dust, damp wood, and something old enough to be forgotten. Portraits hung on the walls, but in every painting, the eyes had been scratched out. Aaron tried to stay calm. He lifted his torch and moved deeper into the mansion. Then, he heard it. Footsteps from upstairs. Thack, thack, thack. Slow, heavy, patient. He called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Still, he climbed the stairs. With every step, the air grew colder. By the time he reached the second floor, his breath was visible in front of him. Then, his torch went out. Just like that. In the dark, a voice whispered very close to his ear, "Why did you come here?" Aaron froze. His throat went dry. He tried to answer, but all that came out was a shaky breath. Then, something touched his shoulder. A hand, cold as ice. He spun around, but there was no one behind him. And then, he saw the mirror. It was an old mirror in a wooden frame, hanging at the end of the hallway. But it did not show Aaron's reflection. Instead, it showed a woman in a white sari standing behind him. Her long black hair covered most of her face, but her eyes were visible, completely black, and she was smiling. Aaron turned around again. No one. When he looked back at the mirror, she was gone. A door at the end of the hallway opened by itself. Creak. Aaron did not want to go in. Believe me, nobody would have blamed him for running right then. But fear has a strange way of pulling people forward. So, he stepped inside. There was a wooden chair in the center of the room. It was rocking by itself, back and forth, back and forth. Then, the same voice whispered again, "After so many years, someone has come." Aaron turned and ran for the stairs, but when he reached the main hall, the front door was gone. Where the door had been, there was only a cold stone wall. That was when the laughter began. Not one voice, many voices. Soft children's laughter from every room. Aaron backed away, trembling. On the wall in front of him, red letters slowly appeared, as though an invisible hand was writing them. "You opened the door." Aaron whispered. "What door?" From beneath the stairs came a loud crash. The floor shook. A hidden wooden door opened in the ground, leading down into a basement. A freezing wind rushed out, carrying a whisper from below. "Come down." Aaron should have run. He should have broken a window, screamed for help, done anything except listen. But he went down. At the bottom of the steps, his torch flickered back on for just a moment. Its weak light fell on an iron chest covered in dust. On the lid, someone had carved the words, "Never open this." Aaron reached toward the lock, and the whole mansion screamed. The next morning, the villagers found his torch outside the gate. Still working, still warm. But Aaron was gone. Since then, people say Black Manor has changed. On moonless nights, if you stand far enough away and look toward the highest broken window, you may see two shadows. One is a woman in a white sari. The other is a young man standing beside her. And the frightening part is not that they appear. It is that they seem to be waiting for someone else. It started when I brought home a stray little tabby cat. She was maybe 6 months old, tiny, underfed, and honestly one of the sweetest animals I've ever met. She had that gentle, almost dog-like way about her, where she just wanted to be near people and be loved. I had known her for about 2 months before taking her in, because she lived around a neighborhood I visited almost every day. I kept seeing her, feeding her when I could, and eventually, I decided I couldn't just leave her out there anymore. Before she came home with me, nothing strange had ever happened in my house. Nothing paranormal. Nothing that made me question whether I was alone in a room. But the very first night she was there, that changed. My girlfriend was over, and the cat was in my room with her. Everyone else in the house was asleep. My girlfriend asked me to grab her a glass of cold water, so I went to the kitchen. While I was pouring it, I heard a meow coming from the dark dining room, and that immediately felt wrong. The cat was in my bedroom. My girlfriend had her. There were no other cats in the house, and the dog was asleep with my mom. The sound wasn't normal either. It was strained, almost painful, like something was squeezing the sound out of her. I peeked into the dining room, and this chill went straight through me. Then I remembered the cat was behind a closed door, asleep with my girlfriend. I'm not the kind of person who runs from things. I've always believed you shouldn't be afraid inside your own home. But that night, I ran back to my room faster than I've ever moved. When I got there, the cat was curled up peacefully in my girlfriend's lap. The next incident was worse. Another night, my girlfriend asked me to grab her a snack. As soon as I opened my bedroom door, it sounded like someone was sprinting down the hallway at full speed. Not walking, not shuffling, running. I shut the door as quietly and quickly as I could, because I didn't want to wake anyone up. But I started shaking. My girlfriend heard it too. The cat stared at the door like she was terrified, then crawled under the blankets. The running stopped, right outside my door. Then I heard breathing, heavy, ragged breathing, like someone had just sprinted across the house and was trying to catch their breath. I pressed my ear to the door because I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. I heard it slow down. I heard what sounded like one final breath. After a few minutes, I reminded myself, this is my house. I live here. So I turned on the hallway light and went to the kitchen anyway, because apparently, I would risk my life for snacks. My girlfriend came with me. Every creak from the air conditioner made us jump. but we got the food and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I was talking with my mom like normal when she suddenly asked, "Did the cat get out of your room last night?" I went cold. She said she had been in the kitchen talking to my stepdad when she heard a meow come from the dining room. She looked at him to see if he noticed, but he didn't know anything about the cat yet, so she just brushed it off and kept talking. Then there was what happened tonight. My girlfriend and I were taking a late shower because that's usually when we get a little quiet time to ourselves. While we were in there, I heard a loud bang against the bathroom door, like someone had bumped into it hard. I got out, dried off, opened the door, and nobody was there. I checked near my mom's room and heard both her and my stepdad snoring, so I tried to ignore it. I did my hair routine, got ready for bed, and went back to my room with my girlfriend. It was around 11, and everyone was asleep. Then I heard my mom call me. Not yelling, just casually, like she was standing somewhere on the other side of the house. I ignored it at first because I thought maybe I was hearing things. Then the cat started clawing at the door, so I assumed she needed to go outside. I don't have a litter box yet, so I took her out to use the bathroom. The whole time, I felt watched. I tried to push through that feeling, and after 10 minutes of her digging, peeing, and burying it, I brought her back inside. As I was walking down the hallway, I heard my mom's voice again. I wasn't really in the mood to talk, so I thought, if she really needs me, she'll call again. But here's the thing. My mom always answers the phone. Always. She'll call me just to ask if I remembered to flush the toilet. So if she actually needed me, she would have called or answered me. The voice I heard sounded like it was coming from the living room I had just passed, but the living room was empty. I got back to my room and shut the door. About 45 minutes later, my girlfriend and I both heard my mom scream my nickname. My nickname is Cheeky. That's what made it even stranger. If my mom is yelling because something is serious, she uses my real name. She doesn't use nicknames when she's scared or upset. But this voice screamed, "Cheeky," like it needed me right away. I texted my mom. No answer. I called her. No answer. I opened my door and stepped out. Nothing. The house was completely silent. When I went back into the room, we were both freaking out. The cat was losing it. She kept clawing at the door, rolling around and acting desperate to get out. Then I heard doors clicking shut around the house, like the latches were catching one after another. It happened several times. The cat was meowing loudly and acting wild, so eventually, we prayed. And I need to be honest, I'm not religious. I don't really believe in the paranormal. My girlfriend believes a little more than I do, but she isn't super religious either. Still, we were scared enough that she called her mom and explained everything. Her mom started praying over the phone. This cat had never scratched us, bitten us, or hissed at us. She was always calm, sweet, sleepy, and gentle. But when the prayer started, we placed her lightly in my lap, and she bent her body away from me, tried to claw at me, hissed, and struggled to get loose. We weren't holding her tightly. She was just sitting there. After the prayer ended, maybe 10 minutes later, everything stopped. What scares me even more is that before we called my girlfriend's mom, my girlfriend had already tried a short prayer just to test whether the cat reacted. The cat had been lying beside us completely relaxed, but the second my girlfriend started praying, she looked right at her and ran to the other side of the room. There was also something that happened earlier that afternoon. My girlfriend and I were lying on the carpet, talking quietly, when she suddenly pulled back and said my face looked like it was changing. I know if you stare at a face for too long, your eyes can distort things, so maybe that was all it was. But it still bothered me. Another thing is that my girlfriend admitted she had been feeling scared of me for no clear reason. I have never hurt her. I would never hurt her. So hearing that made me feel awful and confused, because I don't understand where that feeling came from. My mom loves this cat. She's been reading tarot since she was around 20, and she's in her 40s now. She keeps saying the cat is special, that she's never met a cat like her. She believes cats are spiritual guides, and I've heard people say cats can make you more sensitive to things you normally wouldn't notice. So now, I don't know what to think. Is it the cat? Is it all a coincidence? Did the cat bring something into the house? Or was something already here and I'm only noticing it now because of her? I know how all of this sounds, but I'm telling it exactly how it happened. I'm not trying to exaggerate anything. I'm genuinely scared, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know whether I should keep the cat, get help, cleanse the house, or just try to convince myself this is all in my head. But something feels different in this house now, and I can't ignore that anymore. I've spent a lot of time reading through strange little corners of history, the kind of cases that barely make it into books and usually survive only in dusty records, local rumors, and old newspaper clippings. And every so often, I come across one that just stays with me. This is one of those. It's about two sisters named Agatha and Leonora Hartwell. They lived in a quiet stretch of rural Texas, miles from the nearest town, in a farmhouse that had belonged to their family for generations. According to the records I found, sometime in late November of 1939, the sisters shut themselves inside that house. And then, they didn't come out again. Not for 41 years. What first pulled me into the story wasn't even the house itself. It was the reason anyone went looking in the first place. In February of 1981, a utility worker noticed something odd while reviewing old service accounts. The Hartwell farmhouse was still using electricity. Not a lot, just enough to show that something inside was still running. And what made it stranger was that the bills had been paid without fail for decades, through withdrawals from a bank account opened before the sisters disappeared from public life. So 2 sheriff's deputies were sent out for what everyone thought would be a simple welfare check. But when they got there, they knew almost immediately that something wasn't right. The front door hadn't just been locked. It had been sealed from the inside with rows and rows of nails. The windows were covered from within. The back porch door was braced with heavy boards. Even the old storm cellar had been packed shut with poured concrete. Whoever had done all of that had not been trying to keep people out for a night. They had been making sure no one could leave. When the deputies finally forced their way into the farmhouse, they found Agatha and Leonora sitting at the kitchen table. Calm, still, their hands resting neatly in front of them. And from what I've read, they didn't seem confused. They didn't seem frightened either. They looked like they had been waiting. One of the deputies asked Agatha why they had stayed inside all those years. And she looked right at him and said, very quietly, "We kept the door closed. For your sake." That sentence is the part I can't shake, because according to the notes tied to the case, the official report was completed, filed, and then sealed by the county within 3 days. Later, a few researchers claimed they were able to confirm the Hartwell family death records going back to the late 1700s. Every name matched, every date lined up, and every death, apparently, had been recorded exactly where it was supposed to be. There were also stories about the 2 deputies who found the sisters. One resigned before the year was over. The other, a man who supposedly hadn't stepped inside a church in decades, started attending services several times a week. Neither of them ever gave a public interview about what they saw in that kitchen. And maybe that's the part that makes the whole thing feel so heavy. Because whatever happened in that farmhouse, whatever those sisters believed they were protecting the world from, the people who found them seemed to leave with the feeling that the door had been closed for a reason. By then, he was already married and no longer living on the family farm. He had moved to a bigger town for work, and he had managed to buy himself a motorbike, which was a real luxury at the time. It meant he could still ride back to the farm now and then to see his family. Not far from that farm, there was a forest, and I know every village probably has one place people whisper about, but this forest truly had a strange feeling to it. Even when I was a child, long after all of this happened, we hated going past it. There was a dirt road that ran beside the trees, and whenever we had to pass that stretch, we would walk faster. Sometimes we would run. Nobody really said much, but everybody felt it. That forest also had a dark story attached to it. The local story was that near the end of World War II, Soviet soldiers moving west came across a small group of German soldiers in that area. People said the Germans were executed somewhere in or near the forest. As far as I know, there were never proper graves, no names, no official marker. Just a plain wooden cross fixed to one of the trees. I have not seen that cross myself, so I asked my mother about it recently, just to make sure I was remembering correctly. She told me it is still there. She also said the village priest had placed it there not long after the war. Now, this is what happened to my grandfather. One weekend, he had ridden back to the farm for a celebration. I think it may have been a harvest gathering, or maybe someone's birthday. One of those countryside evenings where people ate, drank, danced, and stayed much later than they planned. By the time he left, it was very late. He got onto his motorbike and started riding back along the gravel road. He had been drinking, yes, but he knew that road almost by memory. Back then, in those villages, people were not exactly careful about that sort of thing. At one point, the road came alongside the forest, and there, in the dark, he saw someone standing at the edge of the road. He always described it as a person, but not quite in a way that felt right. The figure was standing completely still, too still. The body was straight and stiff, almost unnaturally rigid. The arms were pressed tightly against the sides, not relaxed, not hanging normally. The head was lowered, with the chin almost touching the chest, as though the person was staring down at the ground. The coat was what he remembered most clearly. He said it was dark and heavy, made of thick wool, the kind of coat that made him think of an old military winter coat. Not something modern. Not something you would expect to see on a quiet country road in the middle of the night. But the face was wrong. He could not make out any features. No eyes, no mouth, no expression. Just a pale, washed-out blur beneath the lowered head. He said it looked almost milky, like the face had been rubbed away by the dark. And the feet were strange too. He could see the legs, but near the ground, the feet seemed faint, almost missing, as though they were fading into the road itself. The figure never moved. It just stood there, beside the forest, with its head down and its arms tight against its body. My grandfather said he became sober in an instant. He opened the throttle and rode away as fast as that motorbike would take him. He never forgot what he saw. My mother knew the story too, and she was the one who repeated many of those details to me later. I am not saying this proves anything. It was dark. He had been drinking. The light on the motorbike was weak. He was riding past a place that already frightened people. Maybe it was shadow, or fear, or some trick of the road and the trees. But what has always stayed with me is how specific his memory was. The stiff posture. The arms pressed flat to the sides, the lowered head, the heavy dark coat, the blank, pale face, the feet that did not look fully there. And because of what people say happened in that forest during the war, I have always wondered whether my grandfather saw something connected to the men who were said to have died there. I must have been around 13 when this happened, maybe 14. I'm not completely sure anymore, but I remember the feeling of that night so clearly that sometimes it feels closer than yesterday. My family had just moved into this old house at the edge of town. It had been sitting empty for years, or at least that's what the neighbors said. They also said the previous owner had never really left, which sounded ridiculous to me at the time. I didn't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in anything hiding in old houses. Not until that night. My parents had gone out to pick up dinner, and I was alone in the living room watching TV with the volume turned low. It was raining outside, the kind of rain that makes every window sound like someone is tapping gently on the glass. Then I heard a bang from below me, a deep, heavy sound. At first, I tried to pretend it was normal. Houses make noises, right? Pipes settle, wood shifts, old places complain a little. But then I remembered something that made my stomach tighten. We didn't have a basement. At least, I didn't think we did. I got up and walked into the hallway, and there it was. A door I had never noticed before, standing open just a few inches. Cold air was leaking through the gap. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, though I don't remember putting batteries in it. The TV was still glowing behind me, even though every other light in the house had gone out. I pulled the basement door open. The stairs below were narrow and steep, and each step creaked under my feet. The air smelled like damp wood, dust, and something sour underneath it. Something old and familiar in a way I couldn't explain. At the bottom, there were boxes stacked everywhere. Some were covered in sheets. Some looked like they had been waiting there for decades. Then I heard breathing. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, careful breathing, like someone was standing very still and trying not to be heard. I lifted the flashlight toward the far corner. At first, there was nothing there. Then I blinked, and something was standing in the dark. It was too tall. Its shoulders nearly touched the ceiling, and even though the flashlight was pointed directly at its face, I couldn't see its features. But somehow, I knew it was smiling. Not kindly. I remember whispering, "Who are you?" It didn't move. Then it said, "You came back." My whole body went cold. I told it, "I've never been here before." And it answered, "I know." That was what scared me most. Not the voice, not the darkness, not even the way it stood there smiling without a face. It was that answer. For a few seconds, or maybe much longer, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at it. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down. One missed call. Unknown number. When I looked back up, the thing was closer. Not a little closer. Close enough that I could hear that careful breathing again. Close enough that the air around me felt colder. It raised one long arm and pointed behind me. I turned. Nothing was there. When I looked back, it was gone. I ran upstairs so fast I barely felt the steps under my feet. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Then came the knocking. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, patient, right behind the door. My parents came home not long after, and I told my dad everything. I expected him to laugh or get angry or tell me I had imagined it, but he just stared at the wall behind me. Then he said, very quietly, "What basement?" I turned around. The door was gone. There was only a plain wall, smooth, solid, ordinary. I touched it, knocked on it. It sounded exactly like a wall. We moved out not long after that. My parents never really talked about why, and I've never gone back. But sometimes, even now, I hear knocking where no knocking should be. At home, at work, in quiet rooms. Always 3 knocks, always patient.
I
I know this story may not sound as dramatic as some of the others people tell, but it happened exactly this way. And honestly, even after all these years, when I think back on it, I still feel that cold little ripple go across my skin. My wife and I had just moved into an old family house with our little girl, who was a bit over 3 at the time. The place had been passed down to us, and it was sturdy enough, built sometime in the late 60s or early 70s, but it needed a lot of love. We had managed to fix up most of the ground floor before moving in, except for the sitting room. That room was still a mess, full of tools, plaster dust, scraps of wood, and things you definitely would not want a child walking through barefoot. It was an early autumn evening, still warm enough to sit outside. My wife and I were on the terrace, playing cards and talking quietly. The sun had gone down, and we only had one small lantern on the table between us. The door from the terrace into the unfinished sitting room was open, and so was the door from there into the hallway. We left it that way because we wanted to hear our daughter in case she woke up, though she almost never did. Then, all at once, we heard footsteps. Not a creak, not a shuffle. Footsteps. Fast little bare feet slapping across the tile in the hallway, coming straight toward us. My wife and I both stood up at the same time. We didn't even need to say it. We both thought the same thing. Our daughter had woken up and was coming to look for us. And because the room between us and the hall was basically a construction zone, we panicked a little. There were screws, broken bits of plaster, sharp edges everywhere. I was closest to the door, so I went in first, and as I stepped into the sitting room, I could still hear those footsteps, clear as anything. They were right there, moving toward the doorway from the hall. I expected to see my little girl appear at any second, but when I reached the hallway, there was nothing. No one. The hall was completely empty. I stopped so suddenly I almost forgot to breathe. My wife came up beside me a moment later, and she froze too. Every door in the hallway was shut, except for the door to our daughter's room. That door was still slightly open, exactly the same way we had left it. We went in, and there she was, tucked under her blanket, sleeping deeply. She hadn't moved. She hadn't woken up. She was warm, peaceful, and completely unaware of anything. Still, something in us needed to check the house. My wife stayed with our daughter while I searched everywhere. I checked the cellar, the attic, every room, every window, every outside door. Nothing was open. Nothing was disturbed. There was nobody there. Afterward, we sat together and eventually started laughing, but it was that strange kind of laughter people use when their minds don't know where else to put the fear. To this day, neither of us doubts what we heard. Those were footsteps in our hallway. Fast, clear, barefooted footsteps. And they were not our daughters. There is one detail I have never been able to ignore. The people who owned the house before us were relatives of mine, an older couple who had raised their only son there years earlier. He died in an accident when he was 15, long before I was born. My mother once told me that after it happened, the couple shut themselves inside the house for several days and were in such despair that the family feared they might take their own lives. The accident didn't happen in the house. It didn't even happen nearby. But still, I can't help connecting the two things in my mind somehow. That night was about 8 years ago now. We still live in the house. We're happy here, and nothing like it has ever happened again. But I know what we heard. Something ran through that hallway. Hey, I want to start by telling you some important things about me, just so you understand where I'm coming from. I don't have tinnitus or any hearing problems, no brain injuries, No family history of schizophrenia or hallucinations. I'm not under extreme stress, and I don't struggle with anxiety or depression. So, when I tell you about these dreams, these loud, terrifying dreams, you'll know this isn't just some mental health issue or stress-induced nightmare. So, here's what happened. I was coming back home from a work trip in Minneapolis when my car suddenly broke down. It was one of those old models, and it just gave up on me. I had to get it towed to this tiny garage in a small town that felt like it was stuck in time. They said they'd fix it overnight, so I needed a place to crash. I found this apartment on one of those short-term rental apps. You know, the ones where people rent out rooms or couches for a night or two. I ended up renting a room in a 4-room apartment on the edge of town. The place looked nice, recently renovated, clean. But here's the catch. I never met the landlord. I just sent the payment and found the key under the welcome mat. No introductions, no small talk, nothing. It was a bit odd, but I was tired and didn't think much of it. That night, I had the weirdest dream. I was fully aware I was dreaming, which is strange in itself, but in the dream, I was exactly where I was in real life, lying in that bed. I remember looking around the room, taking in every detail, knowing I was asleep but feeling completely present. Then, after what felt like an eternity, seriously, it was like time stretched on forever. The door creaked open. There was someone standing there, but it wasn't a person as you'd expect. It was a black silhouette, like a shadow, with one glowing white eye staring right at me. I felt this odd mix of fear and surreal calm because I knew I was dreaming. But the whole scene was just so bizarre it made my skin crawl. Then it started to scream, but not a normal scream. Imagine the high-pitched, piercing shriek of electronic feedback. A long, drawn-out, agonizing sound that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. The silhouette didn't move a muscle. It just stood there, that single white eye locked on me, screaming endlessly. I could feel my eardrums throbbing, like standing next to a massive speaker at full volume. I tried everything to wake myself up, pinching, slapping my face, but it felt like hours. That scream went on, and I was trapped, fully aware it was a dream, but unable to escape the sound. Finally, I jolted awake. My ears were ringing as if I'd been at a rock concert without earplugs. The relief was overwhelming. I've never been so happy to be awake in my life. The next day, my car was fixed, thankfully, so I got in and drove as fast as I could to get out of that town. But the dream lingered in my mind. It was like the ringing in my ears never really left. I had to pull over at red lights just to collect myself because I kept dozing off. Not from tiredness, but because my body felt like it was stuck processing that nightmare. It was surreal, like a bad echo following me. When I finally got home, I told my wife Helen about everything. She's a nurse, so she took it seriously. She asked me all the routine questions about hydration, medications, anything that could explain the ringing or the strange sensations. Usually, she's calm and collected, but this seemed to worry her more than I expected. Then again, she'd been stressed lately with family issues, so maybe it was just piling on. After a while, I had to stop her with a little white lie. I told her I was fine and that I'd let her know if it happened again. I just wanted to sleep and forget the whole thing. Before I left the room, she gave me a kiss on the cheek and asked, "Are you sure it had only one eye?" I gave her a confused look. What a strange question, right? That night, I went to bed, hoping to escape that horrible dream for good. But within seconds, I realized I was dreaming again, dreaming that I was awake, lying in bed with Helen beside me. I could even feel my sleeping body. I whispered, "No, please, not again." But the silhouette appeared once more. It stepped into the doorway, tilting its head, eye glowing white. I begged it to stop, and somehow I knew it understood me. But that didn't stop it. It began screaming that awful feedback noise again, louder, more painful. My head felt like it was splitting open. Suddenly, I woke up for real. Helen was shaking me gently, her eyes wide with worry. I smiled weakly, relieved that the noise was gone. "Thank you," I blurted out. "I heard it," she said softly. "Heard what?" "The screaming, coming from your ears." That revelation shook me. The next day, Helen insisted I see a doctor. My ears were fine physically, but if I focused, I could still sense that horrible sound lurking. The doctor was puzzled. How could an imagined sound cause physical pain? He placed a stethoscope on my head and asked me to recreate the sound. Concentrating hard, I managed to summon that electronic screech 6 times. It was so intense it felt like the noise was coming out of my skull. The doctor recoiled, visibly disturbed. "Do that again," he urged. I did. Each time the sound echoed out, real and deafening. Helen wasn't there, probably talking with her colleagues, so she missed the scene. The doctor finally admitted it was a form of objective tinnitus, usually triggered by stress or head trauma. "I haven't had either," I told him. "Stress then," he said firmly. "It's almost always stress." He typed on his computer, distractedly showing me another patient's records. He prescribed light blood thinners as a first step, thinking it might be a pinched nerve. Walking out, I noticed Helen was nowhere nearby. I searched for the break room but got lost in the hospital's confusing layout. When I pulled out my phone to call her, I froze. Staring at her smiling photo, my body suddenly went limp and I collapsed forward. It felt like an out-of-body experience. I watched my own body lying on the ground, and down the hallway, draped in darkness, was the same shadowy silhouette. Behind it was a nurse moving in slow motion, as if wading through syrup. The air shimmered around her as she noticed me, but the silhouette didn't need time to react. This time, I wasn't just dreaming. I was unconscious, trapped somewhere between worlds. Oddly, the less aware I was, the more I could move. I raised my finger and pointed angrily at the silhouette. "This ends now!" I shouted. It moved, something it never did before, and it came straight at me, fast. The scream burst forth, louder than ever, deafening me. I saw the nurse down the hall clutching her ears, tears streaming as blood trickled out. Even she could hear it. I tried to move, but the world was frozen. Doors wouldn't open. Elevators stood still. The silhouette closed in, the screech blurring my vision. It reached a dark hand toward me, and I gasped, certain this was the end. But then, Helen rolled me over and gave me an adrenaline shot. Air flooded my lungs, and the scream vanished. Around us, the hospital looked like it was falling apart. Fluorescent lights flickered wildly. Car alarms screamed outside, and the nurse was still on the floor, crying and bleeding. I smiled, overwhelmed by relief. "The doctor said it's objective tinnitus," I said. Helen sighed, resting her head against my chest. "This is no damn tinnitus," she whispered, tears flowing. They wanted me to stay overnight, but Helen convinced them to let me go after 2 hours. She insisted on driving us home, refusing to let me get behind the wheel. On the way, she pressed me. "Did something happen on your trip?" I hesitated. "You have to tell me," she insisted, slamming the brakes suddenly, making the car behind us swerve and honk. She was right. I didn't want to worry her, especially after everything with her brother. He'd been in a terrible accident, and she'd been by his side for weeks, barely sleeping, hoping he'd wake up. When he finally did, he was different, distant, broken. He cut off contact with the family, and since then, Helen's been on edge, hyper alert to anything that might go wrong. She confided, "I think I heard something from him too. Sounds coming out of him." "Like with me?" I asked. She nodded, tears welling as she rested her head on the steering wheel. "Please, tell me everything." So I told her. It wasn't much. A long day of meetings, whiskey, cocktails, coffee. By the time I got back to the hotel, I was dehydrated and threw up. Then I blacked out briefly, just a few seconds. But even then, I swear I saw someone standing at the doorway behind me. That's all, I said. She looked ahead, silent for a while. Then, I think it's me, she said softly. First my brother, now you. It only takes a small lapse. What do you mean? Have you really listened to me? I mean, truly listened? I nodded, confused. No, really listened. She took my face gently, our foreheads touching. At first I heard nothing. Then, faintly, voices. Hundreds of them, far away but growing louder. Screams, shouts, eerie laughter, terrifying screeches. They were there, just beneath the surface. All I had to do was listen. They follow me, she whispered. They took him. Now they want you. What do we do? Listen, please. I focused hard. Dozens of voices, the awful screech far off in the distance. I was so caught up I didn't even notice when she opened the passenger door and unbuckled my seatbelt. With a gentle push, I stumbled out of the car. Helen sped away, tires screeching, past our exit. I stood there, stunned. Through my still adjusting eyes, I saw them. A parade of shadowy figures marching down the highway. Tall and short, some with glowing teeth, extra limbs, or dragging what looked like a corpse. One had spears for legs. They were barely visible, but focusing made them clearer. Suddenly, the silhouette with the white eye stood just to my left, close enough to touch. My heart pounded like a drum. I had to stay awake. If I fainted, it'd grab me. I tried counting seconds, but never got past 2. I closed my eyes, took deep breaths, and fought the rising panic. The screech grew faint but closer to my ear. My mind went blank. Then, it stopped. A hand gently stroked my shoulder. "Hello," it whispered, and vanished. The parade faded down the highway. Helen had driven away, and I haven't seen her since. I believe she did what she had to, lured them away to protect me. If we stay apart, maybe they won't come back. But I wonder about her brother. What really happened to him? I've been trying to find Helen, calling her friends and family, but no one knows where she is. The police are involved, searching for her in the car, but no leads yet. A cop mentioned she might have gone into the woods. Apparently there's some cult activity lately, something dark and unsettling. So here I am, stuck between what's real and what's not, listening for those whispers beyond the silence, hoping to find Helen and put an end to this nightmare once and for all. It's been a few years now since this happened, and I still don't really know how to talk about it without getting goosebumps. I went back to Maui in April of 2022 for my 40th birthday. My husband surprised me with a family trip, and somehow there were 16 of us all together, staying at the Grand Wailea. I know that sounds fancy, and it was, but for me, Maui wasn't about the resort. Maui had been home once. It was where I had worked, where I had loved, where I had lost people, and where pieces of my spirit had been scattered like little shells along the shoreline. My grandmother had lived in Kihei when I was growing up, so visiting her meant getting to visit Maui. She passed away on April 26th, 2 days after my birthday. That date matters. I didn't know how much it mattered until everything unfolded. The whole trip, I kept feeling this ache in my chest. I missed the island badly. The trees, the air, the people, the feeling that the land itself knew your name. My husband could tell I needed to get away from the resort for a while, so the day after my birthday, my friend who still lived on island picked me up with another friend, and we went to Ingao Valley. Before we went, my brother had told me, "You need to get in the water and make 3 wishes." He was strangely serious about it. I had hurt my knee a couple days earlier going down the pool slides with my little girl, but I didn't care. Swollen knee or not, I was going. When we got there, I prayed for my grandmother in the Portuguese garden, and then we hiked up toward the Needle. My friend knew where to go, So we left the regular tourist trail and found a quiet place facing it directly. I had brought a piece of moldavite with me, this little green stone that honestly looked like something out of a legend. I sat there alone for a few minutes, holding it, trying to connect with my dad and my grandmother, both of whom had passed. I just wanted to feel them. I wanted a message, a sign, anything. And then I heard it, clear as day inside me. Go bathe in the warrior water. I had no idea what that meant. We climbed down to the stream, and because of my knee, I basically had to crab walk down the rocks, which was not graceful at all. But when we reached the water, it felt sacred. There was a prayer written nearby in Hawaiian and English, and I asked my friends to read it over me while I dunked myself. The moment I went under, it felt electric. Not cold, not just water, energy. When I came back up, my knee didn't hurt anymore. I felt lighter, younger, almost brand new. My friend said, "You basically just gave yourself a Hawaiian baptism." And that stayed with me, because my birthday had been the day before. After that, I felt pulled to go to the Buddhist temple in Paia. I heard another message in my head, "Ring the bell for Dad." So I did. I went in, prayed, rang the bell 3 times, and waited outside for my friends to pick me up. While I was standing there, I read a plaque I had somehow never noticed before. It said the temple had been blessed by the Dalai Lama on April 24th, 2007. April 24th is my birthday. At that point, the whole day felt like a spiritual scavenger hunt, and Maui was leaving clues. The next day, April 26th, was our last day on the island. It was also the anniversary of my grandmother's passing. We were having lunch at Bistro Molokini before heading to the airport, and our server asked how my hike had gone. I told her everything. When I mentioned the phrase, warrior water, she stopped and looked at me. "What did you call it?" I repeated it. She told me that only true locals called it that. Then I showed her pictures of where I had gone into the stream, and her face changed again. She said the tree near that spot was where baby warriors were once taken the day after they were born to be blessed. That shook me. Then I showed her 2 stones I had picked up. One looked like the Iao needle, and one looked like a heart. I already knew I shouldn't take them home, so I told her I wanted to bless them and return them to the water near the chapel on the resort grounds. She smiled and said that was good. On my way to the chapel, I ran into a local friend and asked him what I should say to bless the stones. He told me, "Mahalo ke akua." So I started repeating it over and over because I didn't want to forget. Mahalo ke akua. Mahalo ke akua. Mahalo ke akua. My friend also told me the chapel doors were usually locked. I remember saying, "I bet they'll open for me." And they did. When I reached the doors, I heard another voice in my mind telling me to remove what I could and lie down. I had just come from swimming, so I was wearing a bathing suit with a wrap and a hat. I took off the wrap and hat, opened the doors, and stepped inside. The second I entered, I felt pushed to the ground. Then I heard, "Keep your eyes closed, don't look." And then the drums started. They were loud, deep, heavy, not like music from a speaker. They were inside my bones. I could feel every beat through my body. I was lying there on the floor of this chapel, eyes squeezed shut, shaking so hard I couldn't move. My skin felt like it was burning. I heard chanting underneath the drums, low and steady. I thought I was losing my mind. I didn't know anything about the night marchers then. I had lived on Maui, visited Maui my whole life, and somehow nobody had ever told me what to do if you encountered them. Eventually, I couldn't stay down anymore. I gathered every bit of strength I had, stood up, lifted my arms with the stones in my hands, and yelled, "Mahalo ke akua!" the chapel filled with gold light. I walked toward the altar, crying, still hearing the drums and chants. When I reached the steps, I was thrown down again. My arms stretched out, my eyes still closed, and the pain came back, sharp and stinging, all over me. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Just like that. The pain became warmth. The fear became peace. It felt like the biggest hug I had ever been given. And I knew that hug. It was my grandmother. On the anniversary of the day she died, I felt her with me. I could hear her. I could feel her. The chapel went quiet and bright, and for a moment, it was like the whole world was holding its breath. When I could finally stand, I left the chapel. Before walking away, I turned back, knelt on one knee with my fist to the ground and my head bowed. I had never done that before. I just knew I was supposed to. Then I returned the stones to the water. When I got back to the restaurant, I was pale. Our server asked how it went, and I said, "What is going on with that chapel?" I told her about the drums, the chanting, the fire, the pain, the gold light. Her eyes got huge, and very quietly she said, "You just met the night marchers." I didn't even know what that meant, so I started searching and reading. I learned about showing respect, keeping your eyes down, lying still, and how if one of your ancestors is among them, they can claim you and protect you. Then I thought, if I was protected, maybe my daughter was too. My daughter, Ava, was 4 at the time. I took her by the hand and asked if she wanted to go pray in the chapel before we left for the airport. She said yes. We were still outside, maybe 20 feet from the doors, when she suddenly knelt down exactly the way I had knelt before. One knee down, fist to the ground, head bowed. She had not seen me do that. I took a picture because I couldn't believe it. When we went inside, I stayed near the back and let her walk ahead. As soon as she entered, she started bowing, over and over, moving toward the altar with her arms rising and falling. When she reached the front, she bowed again, stayed there for a little while, and then came running back to me. She hugged me hard and looked at me with enormous eyes. Then she said, "Mommy, you make fire out of rocks." And after that, she said something I will never forget. "They want you to know thank you for coming to the real Maui." I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. We left the chapel and went to meet my husband and son near the front of the hotel, where the airport shuttle was waiting. While we stood there, my daughter pointed at the statue in the roundabout and shouted, "Look, Mommy, it's a night marcher." The bellman just stared at me. On the shuttle, I tried to act normal, but inside I was spinning. I made small talk with the driver and asked about a gated grassy road I had been curious about all week. He told me it was Oprah's road and said maybe next time he'd take me up there. He was Hawaiian, older, warm, with white hair and painted white nails. I asked him his name. He said, "My name is Pele." And later I learned that, in some stories, Pele may reveal herself after an encounter with the night marchers. Even after we left Maui, the signs kept following me. On the plane, I watched a light little movie just to calm down. And out of nowhere, one of the characters said, "Watch out for those night marchers." When we got back to California, my eyes were swollen nearly shut. I went to urgent care thinking it might be pink eye, but it cleared on its own. I still believe it had something to do with taking pictures inside the chapel. A week later, I got a call from an art director in Lahaina asking me to create pieces for Oprah. And later, I remembered something my grandmother used to say all the time when I was little. She would warn me to watch out for the menehune. That was the word she used, so maybe that's why I had never connected it to the night marchers before. I know this is a lot. I know it sounds impossible. But I remember every second. The water. The drums. The gold light. My daughter bowing without knowing why. The the warmth of my grandmother's spirit. And more than anything, I remember the feeling that Maui had not just let me visit, it had answered me. I've been to a lot of psychics over the years, more than I can even comfortably admit, honestly. I think it was because there was this one person I couldn't get out of my mind, and a part of me kept hoping someone would tell me something that felt real. And you know, I had all kinds of readings. Some were terrible, some were decent, some felt like they were just throwing words into the air and hoping I'd catch one. But out of more than 50 readings, maybe 4 actually stayed with me. There was one woman I saw twice. The first time was in person, and she picked up on so much about me. She picked up on this man I'd been thinking about too, in a way that honestly caught me off guard. I tried to go back to her about a month later, but she turned me away right there in person. Not rudely, exactly. More like she just knew I wasn't supposed to get another reading yet. Then, a couple of months later, I called her. She didn't even see me face to face that time. She only had my first name and my date of birth, and somehow she picked up exactly where she had left off, like she had opened the same book to the same page. A few weeks after that, I called her again, and before I could really say much, she said, "Have you had a reading recently?" I told her yes, and she said, "Then you need to wait." That stayed with me. Later on, I went to a psychic fair with my mom, and one of the women there, someone I had seen maybe 3 or 4 weeks before, looked at me and suddenly said, "You're the one with the beautiful aura." I just froze for a second. Then she said, "Your name is Ava, right?" And I said yes. Then she said, "You're the one thinking about the man from a few years ago?" That part was a little off. It wasn't a few years, it was closer to 10, but still, I couldn't believe she remembered me at all. I asked her how many readings she usually does in a month, and she said around 70 or 80. So either she remembered me out of all those people, or she really was picking up on something again. Either way, it felt strange in that quiet, electric kind of way. Then I wanted to see what she would pick up about my mom. My mom asked about her mother, who had passed away. And this reader, who used Egyptian tarot cards, looked at her and said, "You have a brother, and your sister-in-law is not to be trusted. Be careful with her." My mom's face changed immediately, because that was true. My mom has had problems with her brother and sister-in-law for years. They've been arguing over property for almost 2 decades. Then the psychic said, "You're planning to travel in September. You'll stay until October, about a month." My mom's eyes got so wide. She had been planning a trip in September, but she hadn't said a word about it. Then my mom asked about some land in our family. The psychic said, "It comes from your father's side. It belongs to you, but you need to be careful with your brother." And again, my mom looked stunned. Her father had owned a lot of land years ago, land that was taken during the communist period. So for this woman to say that, so directly, without fishing or guessing, was honestly hard to brush off. Out of all the psychics I've ever seen, I only remember the names of maybe 5. But this woman? I remember her, because the way she read my mother was so precise. No hesitation, no vague little clouds of maybe. She just said it. And the September travel thing still gets me. The brother, the sister-in-law, the land, all of it. At one point, I told her, "You're really good." And she almost looked offended. She said, "Don't say that. It's not me. It's God." That also stayed with me, because she didn't try to sell us anything afterward. No cleansing, no candles, no special rituals, no extra money. Nothing. She just gave the reading. There was another reader once, a man at a little bookstore, who immediately picked up that the person I was asking about was in another country. That was the very first thing he said to me. And this woman at the fair gave me a time frame for when I should reach out to him. But more than anything, I still can't get over the fact that she remembered my name and my aura, my beautiful aura. Hi, I know this might sound strange, but I've been lying here unable to sleep, and for some reason, this story keeps coming back to me. It happened in 2017, and before that trip, I really didn't believe in paranormal stuff. I was the person who always had a practical explanation ready, but after this, I don't know. Something about it changed me. My best friend Mariah and I had gone to Austin for the first time to celebrate our 22nd birthdays. We booked a few nights at the Driscoll, and I'm pretty sure we were staying on the renovated side of the hotel. The first night, I went back to the room alone. I remember opening the door and immediately stopping, because the overhead light was on and the fan was spinning, even though I knew I had turned both of them off before we left. I told myself it was probably just old wiring. That felt reasonable. But then I sat in the room for a couple of hours, and the light kept flickering above me. Eventually I got annoyed, turned it off again, and went into the bathroom. When I came back out, the light was on. That was the first moment where I felt this little cold pinch in my stomach. A few hours later, Mariah came back. We were talking like normal when, right in the middle of our conversation, we heard a woman's voice calling our nicknames. She had this soft accent, and it sounded close, like she was just outside the door. We both froze. Mariah looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah, it sounds like somebody's calling us." At first we thought maybe it was another girl from our group, but she was staying at a hotel across the street. I opened the door and looked down the hallway, and there was nobody there. No footsteps, no doors closing, nothing. We called our other friend, and she was still out at the bar. The weird thing is, we weren't as scared as we probably should have been. We kind of laughed it off, because what else do you do at that point? The next afternoon, we decided to take a nap. Mariah was lying in bed, giggling a little, and I asked her what was so funny. She told me to stop touching her. I was standing across the room. I told her to stop playing around because I thought she was trying to freak me out. But she said something was touching her thigh. Not brushing against her, touching her. I was still being dismissive, so I told her to relax and go to sleep. Not even 10 minutes later, I got into my own bed. I was wide awake, scrolling on my phone, when I felt the mattress dip beside me. It felt exactly like someone climbing into bed next to you. Then I felt pressure on my legs. Then my thighs. Then my chest. I know people talk about sleep paralysis, but I was not asleep. I was completely awake, phone in hand, staring at the room. I tried to wake Mariah, but she was out cold. So I finally said, out loud, "Hey, get off of us. Let us sleep. We haven't done anything to you, so stop being nasty." And after a few minutes, it stopped. The other friend on the trip told us it was probably psychological. She said old hotels lean into ghost stories, and faulty wiring makes people imagine things. I wanted to believe that, honestly. It would have been easier. But then other things happened. One afternoon, a woman came to our room with a tray of cookies. We thanked her, and Mariah started to ask about the ingredients because she has allergies and always asks about nuts. She also asks everyone their name. That's just who she is. The woman gave a name, smiled, and then she was gone. I mean gone fast. No elevator sound, no stairwell door, nothing. Mariah called the front desk and asked for the employee by name. The person at the desk said nobody by that name worked there, and there was no record of cookies being sent to our room. Then there was the man in the lobby. One night, we'd been out on Dirty Sixth and came back to the hotel late. I was walking toward the lobby bathroom when this man in a full black suit stopped me. He had these old-fashioned mutton chops, like something from a Civil War photograph. For context, I'm black, and the way he spoke to me felt very pointed. He asked where I was going and demanded to see my room key. I told him I was a guest and just needed the restroom, but he got more irritated. I saw the same front desk worker we'd been seeing all weekend and called out, "Hey, can you tell him I'm staying here?" The front desk guy didn't say anything. At that point, I got mad. I told the man hotel lobbies are common areas, and I wasn't showing him anything just to use the bathroom. Mariah started asking if he even worked there, and he claimed he was a manager. Eventually, I just walked away, irritated and tired. The next morning, around 6, we got up to get donuts and decided to ask the front desk about him. Mariah called him the colonel-looking dude, which was honestly accurate. I went right up to the desk and asked the employee, "Why didn't you say anything to that man in the black suit last night? We've been talking to you all weekend and you just let him bother us?" The employee looked genuinely confused. He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The manager, the man with the mutton chops." And he told me, "We don't have anyone here who looks like that. I've been here all night." That moment made my whole body go still, because the lobby had all these old photographs on the walls. Men from another time, dressed almost exactly like him. I still don't know what we experienced in that hotel. I just know it didn't feel like a trick, or a misunderstanding, or a spooky story made up for tourists. It felt like something noticed us, and for 3 nights, it made sure we noticed it back. I honestly don't know where to begin with this, because it feels like these things started before I even understood what was happening. When I was little, there were always strange things around the old house. Small things at first. Random wet spots on the floor with no reason for them to be there. My grandfather sometimes speaking to empty space, though at the time everyone explained it away because he had gone through brain surgery and wasn't fully himself afterward. Still, even before I knew anything about ghosts or spirits or whatever people call them, I always felt something was off about that house. It wasn't the house I live in now. This all started in the old one. There was this narrow little hallway between the living room and the kitchen. It wasn't huge, but 2 people could probably squeeze through it. From the living room, you couldn't really see the kitchen. You could only see the hallway, and then you had to turn right at the end to get there. Near that turn, there was a corner where my mother kept things like buckets and small household stuff. One night, I was sitting with my family watching TV. I was facing the television, but I was sitting in a spot where, if I turned my head, I could see straight down that hallway. For some reason, I looked, and there was a figure standing in that corner. I still don't really know how to describe it. It was just there, facing toward us, maybe staring. I couldn't see its eyes clearly, but it felt like it was looking right into the living room, right at my whole family. After that, my memory gets blurry. I only remember dreaming that it followed me. That dream stayed with me for years. After it happened, I was terrified to go to the bathroom alone. I hated looking toward that hallway at night. I hated that whole part of the house, especially after dark. When I was around 10, we moved into a new house. Compared to the old one, this place felt peaceful. I could breathe there. I didn't even like going back inside the old house after that because it always gave me this heavy, bad feeling. But years later, when I was about 15, something happened again. I had my mother's old phone at the time. The power button didn't work at all, so I couldn't turn the screen on or off with it. I used to double tap the screen to wake it up, and when I wanted it to go off, I had to wait for the timer. I slept alone in my room. My parents' room was next to mine, though not exactly close. Usually, I would close my bedroom door before sleeping. I'd go to my room around 10, scroll on my phone for a while, then try to sleep around 11. I'm not a deep sleeper either. Even small sounds wake me up. That night started like any other night. I used my phone for a bit, put it near the side of my bed, closed my eyes, and tried to sleep. Then I heard snoring. At first, I ignored it. Sometimes at night I heard knocking sounds or footsteps on the stairs, and I usually pretended not to notice because I was too scared to check. So I told myself it was probably my father snoring from the other room. I could sometimes hear my parents talking faintly through the walls, so I tried to convince myself it made sense. But then the snoring got louder. It sounded like someone was sleeping right next to me. I froze. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to open my eyes. The worst part was that the bed felt like it dipped slightly, as if someone had actually lain down beside me. I was lying on my side, facing toward the mirror side of the room. My bed was placed so that one side faced the window and the other faced the mirror. The door was also on the mirror side, a little farther away. I peeked just a little, trying to see if anything was there, but the room was too dim and the curtains made everything harder to understand. That was when I noticed my phone screen was still on. It should have turned off already. After a moment, it finally went dark. Then it turned on again. It kept doing that, off, then on, off, then on. Between the snoring, the feeling on the bed, and the phone lighting up by itself, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I would run to my parents' room without looking back. I counted to 10 in my head, then ran with everything I had. But when I reached their door, it was locked. I panicked. I knocked like crazy because I didn't know what else to do. I was so scared I could barely think. Finally, they opened the door and asked what happened. For some reason, I couldn't tell them the truth. The words just wouldn't come out. I only said I wanted to sleep with them. My father went into my room to turn off the fan, but he didn't find anything strange. After that, I slept in my parents' room for a few months. I thought maybe it was only happening in my room, but then something happened upstairs while I was sleeping with my mother. My father had night work that day, so it was just me and my mother on the upper floor. My grandparents and my brother were downstairs. My mother had already gone to bed, and I was also getting ready to sleep. At some point, I needed to turn on the light. I don't remember if I was going to the bathroom or doing something else, but I remember walking toward the switch. As I got close to it, I felt like someone was standing right there beside the switchboard. It was the kind of feeling you get when you nearly walk into another person and instinctively shift your body to avoid them. I actually moved sideways like someone was in front of me. Then I turned on the light. No one was there. That didn't scare me as much as the snoring, but it still shook me. My mother got worried and kept saying it was because I didn't believe in God. I'm agnostic, so I didn't really know what to say to that. The hardest part was that nobody else seemed to see anything. It felt like all of it was only happening to me. A few weeks after that, I was chatting with my best friend, Maya, telling her about everything that had been happening. While I was messaging her, I saw a figure pass by my room. It had the same build as my father, so I thought it was him and didn't react much. But later, when I went downstairs, I didn't see him anywhere. I asked my grandmother where he was, and she told me he hadn't come home yet. The next day, my grandfather passed away. His room was directly below mine. Even now, whenever I think about it, I don't know what to make of everything. When I slept in my own bed, it often felt strangely itchy, but other people didn't seem to have that problem. And for some reason, I hate talking about all of this, especially with my parents. I don't know if it was a ghost. I don't know if it was something else. I just know what I felt, what I saw, and how alone it made me feel. When I was younger, probably around 11 to 13, I truly believed my bedroom had something in it. At first, it didn't feel evil. Strange, yes, but not exactly threatening. I remember one night looking toward the top of my wardrobe and seeing this dark shape curled up, almost like a tiny baby. It stayed with me because before I was born, my mom had lost a baby. Later, she told me that sometimes at night she would hear a baby crying, and she'd come check on me and my siblings, but we'd all be fast asleep. After that, though, things started to feel heavier. Most of it happened at night in the beginning. I'd be lying in bed, trying to sleep, and I would feel movement around me, like someone was shifting close by. Once, I felt breath right against my ear. Another night, I heard someone say my name very clearly. Not faintly, not like a dream. It was loud enough that my whole body froze. Thankfully, I'd already been told not to answer anything like that, so I didn't. There were little things too. I'd walk into my room, leave the door open, turn around, and somehow it would be shut. I got so scared that I started sleeping with my lamp on and the television playing. But then the TV began acting oddly, changing or flickering in ways that made me feel like even that wasn't safe anymore. The worst part, and the thing that happened the most, was my mattress shaking. I could be completely still, holding my breath almost, and I would still feel it trembling under me. Sometimes I could even see it moving. It happened so often that I dreaded going to bed. Eventually, things began happening during the day too. Not as intense, but enough to make me feel watched. A cable lying flat on the floor would suddenly flip up. Curtains would move when there was no breeze. Once, there was loud stomping in the attic, and it wasn't just me who heard it. My dad heard it too, and so did a friend who was over at the time. I also remember seeing dark, hooded shapes pass by outside my bedroom window, even though there shouldn't have been anyone there. My sister shared the room with me, and she didn't experience things as strongly as I did, but she did say the room sometimes felt wrong. She'd feel like she wasn't alone. She noticed things moving too, and every now and then she'd wake up terrified, saying she could see someone standing in the room. Things calmed down after a while. My mom told me that if something was bothering me, I should ask it to stop. She said spirits can listen. So I started doing that. I would say, gently but firmly, "Please stop. You're scaring me." And oddly enough, it did seem to help. A year or two later, I moved into another bedroom. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, but instead my sleep paralysis became much worse. I had terrifying nightmares, moments where I woke up unable to move, and even one experience where I felt like I was outside of my body. The furniture in that room sometimes felt unusually cold, almost icy, and the mattress shaking followed me there too. Every night, or close to it, I felt that same trembling underneath me. When I was around 16, I got a dog, and one night we were sitting in the living room together. She suddenly locked her eyes on one corner of the room, like she was watching something move. Her head followed it slowly, even though I couldn't see anything. Then she started barking and chasing whatever it was around the room. That frightened me more than I expected, because animals don't usually pretend to be scared. Now I'm in my late 20s, and I've had other strange experiences as an adult. I've seen what I believe were spirits. Some didn't feel harmful, but they were still not exactly welcome. I've also heard and sensed my 2 rabbits after they passed, and those moments feel different, softer, comforting. My sister has even said she hears them running around sometimes when she visits. As I got older, I became more connected with witchcraft and paganism, and I think that helped me feel less helpless. It gave me language, tools, and a sense of control. It also helped me find other people who have experienced things they can't easily explain. But the mattress shaking has never fully left my mind. It doesn't happen constantly anymore, but recently it started again. I haven't been sleeping well. I've been going through something emotional with someone, and it's also close to the anniversary of losing one of my rabbits. So now I keep wondering, is the shaking something paranormal, or is it something my mind creates when I'm under stress? And if the mattress shaking was in my mind, then what about everything else from my childhood? I did go to doctors more than once when I was younger, because honestly, I was scared I was losing touch with reality. But no doctor or mental health professional ever gave me a clear explanation, and I was never diagnosed with psychosis. I also had other frightening experiences when I was very young. I remember faces in posters seeming to move. I saw bugs crawling across walls when nothing was really there. And once, the worst one, I saw a porcelain doll come to life. In my memory, it walked along the shelf, turned its head toward me, and its eyes glowed green. Because my childhood was traumatic, and because I lived in an abusive household, I know my memory of that time isn't perfect. Some things are hazy. Some things feel sharp enough to cut glass. So I'm left with questions. Were those experiences spirits? Were they fear? Were they my mind trying to survive an unsafe home? Or was it some mixture of all of it? I don't know. But I do know this. The fear felt real. The shaking felt real. And even now, all these years later, part of me is still trying to understand what was really in that room with me. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was really young, and honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. My mom has an older relative, her uncle, who lives out in rural Missouri. Once or twice a year, when I was growing up, my family would make this long drive to visit him. It was about 10 or 11 hours in the car, and we would usually stay at his house for several days. That was just part of my childhood. It happened so regularly that I never really questioned it. This particular memory happened at his house. I'm in my 20s now, but back then I was probably around 6 years old, maybe 7. And I think that matters, because my memory of it is strange. It doesn't feel like a clear recording in my head anymore. It feels more like I remember remembering it, if that makes sense. For whatever reason, my mom and I were sleeping in the living room on a pull-out sofa bed instead of one of the spare rooms. I don't think my dad was there on that trip, probably because of work. So it was just me and my mom, lying there in this old, quiet house in the middle of the night. And the house always felt a little creepy to me. Not in a dramatic haunted house way exactly. More like it was full of old furniture, old smells, old shadows. It was kind of secluded too, so at night, it felt like the whole world had gone silent around it. At some point, very early in the morning, maybe around 4, I was lying flat on my back. The house was completely dark. No lamps on, no hallway light, nothing. Then I saw something move into my vision. It was slow. That's the part I still remember most clearly. It didn't jump out at me. It just leaned in, almost like it was looking down at me. It had a long neck, or at least that's how I remember it. Its head was perfectly round, and there were 2 horns coming out from the sides. If it had really been standing there, it would have been on my right side. My mom was sleeping on my left, so she wasn't between me and whatever this was. There was no comfort in that. And I know how that sounds. Horns, dark shape, appearing in the middle of the night. It sounds almost too obvious, like something a frightened kid's mind would invent. That's one reason I've always wondered if it was a nightmare. For years, I thought maybe my eyes had been closed, and I somehow saw it through my eyelids, because I remember it as a dark silhouette against a slightly lighter darkness. But when I really think about it now, I'm not so sure. My eyes might have been open. Then again, why would I have been lying flat on my back at 4 in the morning with my eyes open? I've never really slept that way. I usually sleep on my side. So that's another thing that makes me question it. But then there's the part that still unsettles me. I remember it speaking. Just one word. Hello? That was it. Nothing else. Just a simple, quiet hello. The voice was deep and rough, almost watery, kind of like the voice of Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. And when I was little, I was terrified of that character. I was also raised in a Christian household, so I had this childhood fear of the devil too. Add that to an old, dark house that already made me nervous, and I can absolutely see how all those fears could have tangled together in my sleep and turned into one awful nightmare. But what makes me hesitate is what happened after. I don't remember waking up. I remember the figure slowly moving out of my field of vision, and then I just lay there. I squeezed my eyes shut and stayed completely still. I was too scared to move, too scared to wake up my mom, too scared to even roll over, because I had this horrible feeling that it might still be in the room with us. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, and I remember my body getting uncomfortable from holding the same position for so long. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I've had that a few times, and this didn't feel like that. I could have moved. I just didn't, because I was terrified. That's really all I remember. I've never had much in the way of paranormal experiences, even though I've always believed there's more out there than we understand. I've always been interested in that kind of thing, but this is the one memory I keep coming back to. I don't know if it was a dream, a nightmare, my imagination, or something else entirely. I just know that all these years later, I can still picture that shape leaning over me in the dark, and I can still hear it say, hello. Most families have a few strange stories tucked away somewhere, but mine has more than a few. Over the years, there have been footsteps with no one there. Things moved around when nobody touched them, odd noises in empty rooms, and little kids in the family saying things they had no possible way of knowing. But the one that stayed with me the most is the one we ended up calling Cat Eyes. This happened a little over 20 years ago, when I was about 8 years old. Back then, my family lived in a 3-bedroom house. It was me, my parents, and my 2 younger siblings. The house had 2 living rooms. The second one was more of a family room, though we didn't really use it much at the time. The layout was kind of unusual. When you walked through the front door, you came right into the main living room. From there, you could see straight down the hallway toward the bedrooms. If you moved a little farther in, the kitchen was off to the left, and just past the kitchen was the family room. So from the couch in the main living room, you could see into the kitchen, and if the angle was right, into part of the family room too. At that point, the family room was mostly empty. There was an old cloth rocking chair in there, maybe a couple of spare chairs from the kitchen, but not much else. That night, I was sleeping on the couch in the main living room with my younger brother. It was just a normal night. We had the TV on, probably cartoons, and we both drifted off. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. When I was a kid, I had this habit where I'd wake up, go get a drink of milk, and then fall right back asleep. I did it all the time. So when I opened my eyes that night, I didn't think anything of it at first. I was lying on my side facing the TV. The television was still on, and it was the only light in the house. That bluish flicker was moving across the room, making everything look dim and soft around the edges. I sat up and looked toward the kitchen. That's when I saw her. In the family room, right in the middle of the floor, was the old rocking chair, and sitting in it sideways was a girl. She looked maybe 10 or 11 years old. She was leaning against the back of the chair, turned just enough to face me. She wasn't sitting normally. Her body was angled in this stiff, unnatural way, like she had been waiting there for me to wake up. She was wearing an old-fashioned black school uniform with long white socks and black shoes. Her skin was pale, but not just pale. It almost looked like she had a faint glow around her. Not bright enough to light up the room, but enough to make her and the chair stand out from everything else. Her hair was white, or maybe silver. It had bangs that came down across her forehead in this blunt, rounded way. Her mouth was slightly open, like she was breathing through it because her nose was stuffed. But her eyes were the worst part. They were too big to be normal, but not so big that they looked fake. They were yellow-green, almost glowing, and shaped like a cat's eyes. The pupils were black, thin, and vertical. She just stared at me. I stared back. I still don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe I was too scared to think clearly. Maybe getting milk was such a normal part of my routine that my body just decided to keep going. So I got up from the couch, and I started walking toward the fridge, which also meant walking closer to her. As soon as I took that first step, I noticed something else in the family room. Behind the girl, off to the left, there were two children. They were bluish, see-through, and younger than her. They were passing a ball back and forth. On the other side, there was another child, also blue and transparent, jumping rope by herself. All three of them faded out around the knees, like their lower legs just dissolved into nothing. Then I heard it. Playground sounds. Children laughing, running, calling out. The kind of noise you'd hear at recess when a whole playground is full of kids. But it was happening inside my house. The cat-eyed girl never moved. She just kept watching me. The other children kept playing behind her, like I wasn't even there. I stayed close to the wall and slowly made my way to the fridge. Every step felt like it took forever. I didn't look away from her until I reached the refrigerator, because from that spot, the family room was out of sight. The second I opened the fridge door, the playground noise stopped. Completely. The light from the fridge came on, and everything suddenly felt sharper, more real. I stood there drinking milk and trying to convince myself I was half asleep. I told myself I was dreaming, or hallucinating, or imagining things because the house was dark and the TV was still on. Then I put the milk back. And when I closed the fridge door, the playground sounds came back, louder than before. I peeked around the corner. They were all still there. The three blue children were still playing. The girl was still in the rocking chair, still sideways, still staring at me with those yellow-green cat eyes. She hadn't moved at all. I backed away slowly, all the way to the couch, never taking my eyes off her. When I reached it, I crawled under the blanket, curled up as small as I could, and hid there until I eventually fell asleep. Nothing else happened that night. I don't remember exactly how long it took me to tell my family. Maybe I waited a while. Maybe I tried to pretend it hadn't happened. But eventually, I told them what I saw. And after that, the name Cat Eyes stuck. My family still brings it up sometimes. And all these years later, I still think about that girl in the rocking chair, watching me from the family room. A little over a year ago, my whole life changed in the most painful way. My husband passed away without warning, and I was still trying to understand how to breathe through that kind of grief when my mother became seriously ill. She was living by herself in the old family house, and once her condition got worse, I knew I couldn't leave her there alone. So I packed what I needed, left my own place behind, and moved in with her so I could take care of her properly. At first, I thought the sadness was what made the house feel so heavy. Grief does that, you know? It settles into the walls. It changes the air. But then my mother started saying strange things. She was in bed most of the day, weak from her illness and the medication, and she kept telling me she heard noises in the hallway. Not just creaking floorboards or pipes. She said she heard voices, faint voices, calling her name. I tried to be practical about it. I told myself it was the medicine, or her fever, or maybe just the old house making old house sounds. I didn't want to let fear in. I already had enough fear living inside me. Then, a few days later, I saw something myself. It was the middle of the afternoon, broad daylight. I had just finished cleaning up around the house, and my mother had fallen asleep. I went into her room to check on her, just like I always did. And when I stepped inside, I stopped dead. There was a woman standing beside my mother's bed. She was dressed completely in black, from head to toe, and I could see her face so clearly that even now, I wish I couldn't remember it. Her skin was pale in a way that didn't look human, and her eyes were huge, wide open, fixed right on me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just stood there, frozen, with this terrible cold feeling moving through my body. Then, without even thinking, I covered my eyes with both hands and started praying out loud. I prayed like a child. I prayed because it was the only thing my body knew how to do. I must have stood there for a full minute with my hands over my face. When I finally lowered them, she was gone. My mother was still asleep, calm and untouched, as if nothing had happened. 2 nights after that, it got worse. I was sleeping in the room next to my mother's, so I could hear her if she needed me. I had just lain down and was starting to drift off when I noticed a dark shape at the foot of my bed. It looked like a shadow, but too solid, too still. I stared at it, trying to convince myself I was half asleep. Then something grabbed me. I didn't see hands, but I felt them. A sudden, violent pull, like something invisible had caught hold of me and was dragging me off the bed. The force was so strong that my blanket flew up and landed across the room. I screamed then. I got out of that bed so fast I don't even remember standing up. I ran into my mother's room and stayed there beside her until morning. I did not sleep. Not for 1 second. The moment I truly broke was the next week, when my sister Mara came to visit. A few minutes before she arrived, I was sitting alone at the kitchen table, eating something small because I hadn't had much of an appetite. Suddenly, I felt this sharp, crushing pain around both of my wrists. It felt exactly like someone had grabbed me with both hands and was squeezing as hard as they could. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Then I heard Mara's car outside, and I ran out of the house crying so hard I could barely speak. I told her I couldn't stay there anymore. I told her something was in that house, and it wanted to hurt me. She was frightened, but she tried to calm me down. Then I told her what had just happened in the kitchen. She pulled up my sleeves, and both of us went silent. There were bruises forming around my wrists, deep purple marks, and you could see the shape of fingers in them, like someone had pressed their hands into my skin. That was when I lost it. I told her, "It's him. It has to be him. He doesn't want me here. He doesn't want me to leave our old life behind. He's looking for me." But Mara grabbed my face gently and made me look at her. She said, "No, listen to me. That is not your husband. This is not love. This is something else." And I think I needed someone to say that to me, because grief can twist fear into strange shapes. It can make you believe the worst thing is still connected to the person you miss. Mara didn't waste any time. She called our aunt, who knew the parish priest in town, and by the next morning, he came to the house. He blessed every room, the bedrooms, the kitchen, the hallway, even the corners that always felt too dark no matter how many lights were on. Then he blessed me too. And after that, the house changed. I don't know how else to describe it. The air felt lighter. My mother stopped hearing voices. The hallway went quiet. I never saw the woman in black again, and nothing has touched me since. For a while, I thought maybe that was the end of it. But a few weeks later, I learned something I wish I hadn't. Some relatives mentioned, very carefully, that my late husband's family had been connected to dark spiritual practices back in their hometown. Things people didn't like to talk about, things that had followed the family for years. I don't know what's true. I don't have proof. And honestly, I'm too afraid to go digging for answers. All I know is this: whatever was in that house was not my husband. And I am grateful every day that it finally let go. I wanted to share a few experiences that, to me, felt like signs from the afterlife, from my beloved dad. I'll call him Ray here. He passed away in December 2025 at just 58 years old. Before losing him, I was honestly a huge skeptic when it came to anything paranormal. I never really believed in signs, messages, or anything like that. But after Ray died, a few things happened that changed the way I see all of it. He had always been so strong, athletic, fit, full of energy, and successful in his work. We all thought he had so many years ahead of him. Then one day, completely out of nowhere, he lost feeling in his left arm and hand. Not long after that, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. The illness changed everything. He became paralyzed, unable to walk, and had to use a wheelchair. Later, it affected his mind too. The tumor caused dementia and hallucinations, and I became one of the people caring for him until the end. It was heartbreaking to witness, but also one of the greatest privileges of my life. I got to be there for him, the way he had always been there for me. Before he died, Ray used to say something very specific to me. He told me that if I ever saw a man wearing a beige hat, and that man lifted the hat to greet me, then I should know it was him sending me a message from the other side. At the time, I would just smile and gently go along with it. I thought it was sweet, but I didn't really believe it. But since his passing, I've seen it happen more than once. Men in beige hats, different kinds too. Caps, flat caps, wide-brimmed hats, even one that looked almost like an old-fashioned fedora. They would catch my eye as I passed them, and then lift their hats slightly, almost like a quiet greeting. That had never happened to me before he died. Not once. And then suddenly, after he was gone, it started happening. There was also a song we shared together. It was Father and Son by Cat Stevens. We listened to it often, and it was played at his funeral. Ray used to tell me that if I ever heard it randomly, I should take it as a sign from him. I live in Hong Kong, and that song is not something you usually hear playing here, especially not in taxis where the radio is usually focused on Chinese music. But over the past year, I've been in several taxis where that exact song suddenly came on. Each time, it felt uncanny. The air would turn cold, even in the middle of Hong Kong heat and humidity. I remember one driver actually mentioning that he had goosebumps too. We both felt it at the same time, this strange chill that didn't match the weather at all. And then there was the day of his funeral. Before Ray passed, he told me he believed he would die at 5 p.m. I remember thinking that was such a strange thing to say. How could anyone know the exact hour they would leave this world? But he was right. He took his last breath at 5 p.m. A few weeks later, we held his funeral in a beautiful garden. It was one of those bright, clear days where the sky looks endless. There wasn't a single cloud above us. Then, exactly as the clock reached 5 p.m., rain began to fall. Not a drizzle either. It poured. Maybe some people would call all of this coincidence. I understand that. I probably would have said the same thing once. But to me, these moments felt personal, They felt like Ray finding ways to say, "I'm still here." I'm sharing this for anyone who has lost someone important and is trying to make sense of the silence they leave behind. I don't expect everyone to believe it. I only know what I felt. These experiences opened my heart to the possibility that love does not simply disappear when someone dies. Maybe it changes shape. Maybe it becomes a song in a taxi, a sudden chill in the heat, rain at exactly the right moment, or a stranger lifting a beige hat on an ordinary street. I've been carrying these memories for a long time, and I feel like I need to finally say them out loud. Not because I expect everyone to believe me, but because somewhere out there, I really believe someone else has gone through something like this too. Most of this happened when I was still very young, around 6 to 9 years old. And I know what people usually say when a child tells a story like this. They say it was imagination, or a dream, or the dark playing tricks on the mind. But I knew the difference between make-believe and real life. I knew when I was awake. I knew what fear felt like in my body. And some of these things left marks I could actually see. The first thing I remember happened when I was about 6. I was sleeping beside my mother in our old house, the one near the edge of the village. It was late autumn, close to Halloween, and the room was almost completely dark except for these thin little strips of light coming through the shutters. At some point during the night, I opened my eyes, and in the corner of the room, I saw a shadow. It wasn't vague. It wasn't just a jacket hanging on a chair or some shape my sleepy mind invented. It looked like a person standing there, and then it raised its hand. It waved at me. Not slowly, not like some strange drifting motion from the light. It waved the way someone waves when they know you can see them. I remember whispering, "Mom, is that you?" My mother stirred, half awake, and turned on the lamp. The second the light filled the room, the shadow disappeared. Just gone. No object there, no explanation, nothing in the corner that could have made that shape. My mother told me to go back to sleep, but I didn't. I just lay there staring at that corner, waiting for it to come back. The second experience happened a few years later when I was around 9. It was Halloween morning, and my mother and I were on a bus heading toward the village. I remember sitting beside her, looking out the window, when I started hearing 2 people talking behind us. A young man and a woman. Their voices were clear, not muffled, not far away. They sounded like they were sitting right in the seats behind us. But the things they were saying were so strange. The man was talking about belonging to some kind of old vampire order, not in a joking way, not like a kid making up a game. He sounded calm and serious. The woman told him the place where she was staying had something in it, something violent, something like a poltergeist. They spoke as if all of this was normal to them, like they were discussing work or family matters. I sat there frozen, listening. Then, at the end, one of them said something like, "We'll see each other at the next gathering." And right after that, I felt this cold rush go through me. It was sudden, like all the warmth had been pulled out of the air. I turned around immediately. The seats behind us were empty. Completely empty. The bus hadn't stopped. No one had gotten off. There was nowhere for them to go. I looked at my mother, but she hadn't reacted at all. She hadn't heard anything. Not one word. Then there was the night with the scratches. I was sleeping beside my mother again, and I woke up in that heavy, strange way where your body feels slow, but your mind is already terrified. There was another shadow near me. This one wasn't shaped like a person. It didn't have arms or a face or any clear outline. It was darker than the dark around it, almost like a stain moving through the room. and then I felt pain on my neck. Sharp pain. I saw the shadow close to me, and I had the horrible feeling that it was scratching me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. Fear had pinned me down. The next morning, I checked my neck. There were 3 marks there. Not fresh red scratches either. They looked older somehow, like thin, healed scars. But they hadn't been there before. I know they hadn't. And then, by the following day, they were gone. Completely gone. No scabs, no redness, no lines, no trace of anything. The last experience was more recent. I was in my own room, in my own bed, drifting in that space between sleep and waking. Not fully asleep, not fully awake. And suddenly, the room filled with voices. Not one voice, not 2, dozens of them. Maybe more. They were all talking at once, overlapping, rising and falling around me. It sounded like I had been dropped into the middle of a packed market or a crowded train station, except I was still lying in my bedroom. I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was too many voices layered over each other, but the sound was everywhere, close, surrounding me, and there was no one there. I know people will explain these things away. They'll call it sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, childhood fear, an overactive imagination. Maybe that makes sense on paper, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know what I felt on my skin. And I keep wondering whether anyone else has seen a shadow that seemed aware of them, a shadow that waved, or heard a full conversation from people who vanished the moment you turned around. Because I don't think I was alone in this. I really don't. I want to start by saying I've had quite a few strange experiences over the years. Paranormal encounters, sleep paralysis, things I still don't fully know how to explain. I'll probably talk about those another time, but today, I want to focus on one specific thing that happened to me. To give you a bit of background, the place I lived in was built on old marshland. There had been a village there for generations, but the part I'm talking about was a little newer. Back in the 1930s, a shoemaker from another country came across the area and decided to build there. He opened a shoe factory and built a whole little town around it for the workers. And honestly, it sounded incredible. There were houses designed in the style of his home country, a swimming pool, shops, a cinema, a petrol station, tennis courts, a village hall, and a large hotel. He owned all of it. Over time, the factories closed, the buildings were sold off, and the whole area changed. The hotel was eventually converted into flats, and that's where this story really begins. When I was 17, I moved in with my boyfriend at the time. He was 23, and we moved into one of the flats inside that old hotel. The relationship was awful. He was controlling, cruel, and the whole thing was toxic from beginning to end. Something else worth mentioning is that, years before that, my grandfather had also lived in the same old hotel building. That matters because I remember something from his flat very clearly. His bathroom always felt wrong. It was a tiny room, maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, with no windows at all because it sat toward the middle of the building. There was nowhere for anyone to look in from, no hidden corner, no outside view. Nothing. But every time I went in there, I had this heavy feeling that someone was watching me. When I moved into the flat with my boyfriend, I realized we were on the same floor my grandfather had lived on. And then, little by little, I started feeling it again. That same watched feeling in the bathroom. It went on for months. Nothing dramatic happened at first. It was just that horrible sense that I wasn't alone. even when I knew I should have been. Then one day, my younger brother Mason came over to visit. He was 16 at the time. I had been in the bathroom and got that familiar feeling again, the prickling, uncomfortable sense of being observed. I left the bathroom, grabbed a laundry basket, and went into the bedroom to collect clothes for the wash. When I walked in, Mason was standing there with his back to me. At least, I thought it was Mason. He was wearing a pale yellow super dry shirt and black Adidas joggers with tight cuffs at the ankles. I remember it clearly because I was looking right at him. I started chatting away to him, just about whatever random thing had caught my attention that day. As I was speaking, he slowly began to turn around. I could see the side of his face. And then I heard talking from the living room. I stopped. I listened again, and I heard my brother's voice coming from the other room. Then he called out, "Who are you talking to?" I turned toward the bedroom door and saw Mason walking out of the living room. My stomach just dropped. I looked back to where he had been standing in the bedroom, and there was no one there. I turned back to my actual brother and said, "You were just in here with me." He looked completely confused and told me he had been in the living room the whole time. He said he heard me talking and wondered who I was speaking to. For a second, I tried to make it make sense. I thought maybe he had somehow walked around me without me noticing. But then I looked at his clothes. He was wearing something completely different. Not the yellow shirt, not the black Adidas bottoms. A different outfit entirely. I didn't know what else to do, so I just finished gathering the laundry. Afterward, I put the laundry basket on top of this big oak wardrobe we had in the bedroom. Later that day, I told my boyfriend what I had seen. He laughed at me. He told me it was all in my head. And without even thinking, I said, "It'll show you." The words just came out of my mouth. I didn't plan to say them. I don't even know why I said them. That night, both of us woke up at the exact same time and sat straight up in bed. Neither of us knew why. And the moment we sat up, that laundry basket flew from the top of the wardrobe. It didn't fall. It didn't slide. It flew. It shot across the room, all the way from one side of the bedroom to the other, and slammed into the opposite wall. That room was long, maybe close to 20 feet, and the basket crossed it like it had been thrown. I just looked at my boyfriend and said very calmly, "I told you it would make itself known." He sat there with his mouth open, completely stunned. And somehow, I just lay back down and went to sleep. Not long after that, we moved out of the old hotel. Then the relationship ended soon after, which honestly was for the best. For years, I didn't really understand what had happened. Then I started seeing people talk about mimics, and it made me think about that day in a different way. The strange thing is, I never felt like whatever it was wanted to hurt me. If anything, it felt like it was on my side, especially when it came to my boyfriend. But when I read about mimics taking the shape of someone you trust, sometimes to draw you in or trick you, that unsettled me more than I expected. So I still wonder about it. Was it a mimic? Was it something attached to that old building? Or was it something else entirely? It's been a little over a year since everything started. The first thing that happened was a seizure. It was early morning, that gray, half-awake hour where the whole house feels too quiet. I ended up in the hospital, and from that point on, my parents kept trying to get me help. At first, doctors treated it like depression. They called it unspecified, which honestly never sat right with me. I was put on medication, and I really did try to trust the process. I took it the way I was supposed to. I wanted it to help. But instead, I started having these intense, vivid nightmares. Not just bad dreams, but the kind that leave something behind when you wake up. The symptoms didn't ease the way they were supposed to, so eventually, I stopped taking the medication, and after a while, the nightmares finally faded. That was when I started wondering whether the hospital had ever understood what was happening to me at all. Not long after that, I had one dream that felt different from the others. At first, I was in this ordinary-looking space. Nothing strange, nothing threatening. Then suddenly it felt like something outside the dream had forced its way in. The whole space began breaking apart. The best way I can describe it is that my mind crashed, like a computer system failing. Everything around me glitched and collapsed into this harsh blue screen, almost like a blue screen of death. There was this awful mechanical grinding sound too, like machinery dying. Then I saw 3 claw marks slash across everything. After that, the dream went black, except for those marks. They were bright red, blood red. When I woke up, I could still feel them on my back. That was the moment I knew I had to leave that house. My parents didn't agree. They didn't believe anything paranormal was involved. They thought I was overreacting, and whenever I tried to cleanse or smudge my room, my family pushed back against it. I felt trapped, like I was being left exposed to whatever was happening. So I moved out anyway. I went to stay with my fiancé, Evan, and honestly, that was the best decision I could have made. For the first time, I had space to practice my own beliefs without constantly being dismissed or interrupted. After I left, the attacks became less intense, but they didn't stop completely. I still heard voices. They kept begging me to come back. They kept saying there had been a mistake. That went on for months. Even now, every so often, I still hear something trying to pull me back toward that old place. But I don't trust it. To me, those voices feel like the same spirits that were troubling me there. I believe they're trying to deceive me into returning, so they can get close again. There's another part of this that I should explain. Before the attacks became this severe, my mother had my name bound through a Buddhist Tao Feng Shui medium. I don't think she meant harm. I think she was scared and looking for help wherever she could find it. But I also don't think she checked carefully enough to know whether that person was truly safe or trustworthy. After everything that happened, I started to feel that the medium may have opened the door to something negative without realizing it. After I moved out, I began hearing hostile phrases in Chinese coming from what felt like the other side. They were sharp, mocking, and aggressive. That completely destroyed whatever trust I might have had in that medium. Evan told me I needed to block the person completely, and I did. We handled the unbinding in our own way, through our own practices. But even after that, something else began happening at Evan's place. I started experiencing repeated visits from a spirit that seemed to carry a chainsaw. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, I know. But it didn't feel ridiculous when it happened. The voice sounded female, with a faint southern accent. Almost every time it appeared, I would hear the same thing first, the revving of a chainsaw. Then the spirit would say 1 or 2 words, and after that, I would feel the sensation of the running chainsaw being pressed against my body. We put salt lines at every doorway and window in the bedroom. That helped a lot. It didn't erase the problem completely, but it reduced the worst of it. Then today, I heard what sounded like the same spirit asking where its chainsaw had gone. And now I'm left wondering what I'm supposed to do. How do I permanently remove this spirit from our space? And if there are others with it, how do I keep them away too? I know some people might see this as a spiritual issue more than a ghost story. Maybe it's both. All I know is that whatever these spirits are, they've made repeated attempts to distort how I perceive the world around me. I also want to be clear about something. Christian references or Christian-based advice are not what I'm looking for. I converted to Wicca Shintoism a long time ago, and I'm asking for that to be respected. I'm not trying to convince anyone of what I believe. I'm just trying to protect my home, my peace, and myself. I've told a couple of strange stories before, including the one about the yellow-eyed thing, and the only time I ever saw my granddad look truly afraid. But after this, I think I'm going to step back from telling these for a while, mostly because I don't want people thinking I'm making it all up. This one happened on the night my old best friend and I saw what I can only describe as the faceless runner. It was my 18th birthday. Where I grew up in South Africa, 18 is the legal drinking age, so naturally, I had my best mate over. His name was Keon. We planned to have a few drinks, do some late-night fishing, and just enjoy the day. Things had been quiet around the farm for a few months. There were still the odd, strange incidents, missing livestock here and there, chickens or ducks found without their heads, that kind of thing. A lot of it got blamed on wildcats or meerkats, and honestly, I never really understood all of it. But that night felt different. Maybe the alcohol made everything feel sharper and stranger, but I know what I saw. Earlier that afternoon, around 2, Keon and I went to a pond on a neighboring farm and fished for a few hours. We caught a few different kinds of fish and stayed until just after sunset. Then we headed back home and had a braai with my grandparents. It was a good evening at first, warm, easy, ordinary. After my grandparents went to bed, Keon and I went to my room and played some Call of Duty. We sat there for hours, just joking around and being lazy. Eventually, our buzz wore off, so we decided to drive to the nearest tavern and get a few more drinks. We got dressed, went outside to my bakkie, climbed in, and I turned the key. Nothing. The engine didn't even want to try. My granddad was a diesel mechanic, so we woke him up and asked him to take a look. He checked everything. Fuel was fine, filters were fine, battery was fine. There was no obvious reason it shouldn't start. Eventually, we gave up and went back inside. That's when the whistling started. At first, it was quiet, just a few off-key whistles. We thought it was coming from the game, maybe some background sound or dialogue, so we ignored it. Then it got louder and louder, until it sounded like someone was standing right outside my bedroom window. We paused the game. About 2 seconds later, the whistling stopped too. Keon and I looked at each other, and then we went outside to check. You have to understand, farm attacks were something people worried about constantly, so that fear was always sitting somewhere in the back of your mind. We walked around the house, checked the windows, the yard, the ground. Nothing. No footprints, no movement, no sign that anyone had been there. So we went back inside. Almost the moment we started playing again, the whistling came back. But this time, it sounded like it was coming from every window and doorway at once. Now, being the brave 18-year-old men we thought we were, we immediately paused the game, panicked, shouted, and locked ourselves in my bedroom. After a while, we calmed down enough to feel stupid, unlocked the door, and went outside again. We searched everywhere. Still nothing. And that's when I noticed how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, not nighttime quiet, dead quiet. No animals, no insects, no breeze, nothing moving anywhere. We stood outside for a bit, had a cigarette to steady ourselves, and then the whistling started again. This time it came from the field about 30 meters from the house. That field had burned a while before, so the grass was only just starting to grow back. It had this soft green layer over the dry brown land, and under the moonlight, it looked almost unreal. I grabbed the big spotlight flashlight from the kitchen, and we started walking toward the sound. And I promise you, I'm not trying to make this sound more dramatic than it was. There was a man standing in the field, not moving, not turning, just standing with his back to us. He was tall, taller than my granddad by at least a full head. He wore an old, ragged sun hat, a faded beige-gray jacket, and dark trousers. and beside him was an animal. It looked like a dog, but not completely. Its legs were too long and too bushy, and the joints looked wrong, like they bent the way they weren't supposed to. Its snout was stretched out and strange, far longer than it should have been. They both just stood there. Keon and I moved closer, slowly. We got within maybe 4 meters. Then the man and that thing beside him turned around at the exact same time. The dog, or whatever it was ugly in a way I can't properly explain. Twisted, misshapen. And the man, we couldn't see his face. It wasn't covered. It wasn't hidden in shadow exactly. It was just like there was nothing there that my eyes could understand. We thought for one brief moment, maybe he was a neighbor. Maybe someone had gotten lost and wandered onto our land. So we kept walking toward him. But when we got about 2 meters away, something strange happened. Every step we took forward, he seemed to take 1 step back. Not quickly, not obviously. But the distance between us stayed the same. We stopped after a few more steps and just stared at him, trying to make out any feature, any detail, anything human. The silence was unbearable. I remember turning to Keon and asking, "What do we do?" Before he could answer, the whistle came again. It came from the man, from where his face should have been. That was enough for both of us. We started backing away, keeping our eyes on him. Step by step, slow at first. Then he started walking toward us. Every step we took back, he took 1 forward. Then for every one of our steps, he took 2. Then he and that awful dog-like thing started running. We turned and bolted for the house. I could hear him behind us. I could hear the movement, the pace, the way he was keeping up far too easily. Near the last stretch, maybe 15 or 20 meters from the house, Keon tripped hard. Later, he swore something pushed him. I didn't see it happen clearly, but I believe him. I really do. We made it inside and slammed the door. Then there was nothing. No footsteps, no whistle, no animal, no wind. Just silence again. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, my grandparents said we were probably drunk or worked up or imagining things. Nobody believed us. But Keon was there. He saw what I saw. And even now, if I sat down and really tried, I think I could still draw that horrible dog. I could probably even find clothes close to what that man was wearing. But I still don't understand how he moved like that. How did he match our speed? How did he get so close so quickly? And why couldn't we see his face? That part bothers me most, because it wasn't just dark. It wasn't just far away. There was simply nothing there. I was little when it first happened, maybe 7 or 8 years old. I remember telling my mom that I had seen a man, a really tall man. I kept saying he was tall, tall. He had his pants pulled up high with a belt, and when my mom asked what else he was wearing, I told her he had a big cross necklace, but it wasn't like a normal necklace. I said it looked like it was made out of sticks. As soon as I said that, my mom started crying. I didn't understand why. My dad scolded me for talking like that, and after that, everything gets blurry in my memory. I don't really remember what happened next. Later on, my sister told me she had to take me outside to play because my mom was crying too much. Years passed. When I was around 12, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a woman sitting near my niece Mariana's bed. Just for context, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. My older brother is about 20 years older than me, so by then I already had nieces and nephews in the house. At first, I thought the woman was my mom. She was wearing a rebozo that covered most of her face, the way my mom sometimes wore one, especially for church. She had on a white blouse with red and orange details and a long blue skirt. I remember those colors clearly because I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman was sitting there holding my niece's feet, and she looked like she was crying. I was used to waking up during the night, so at first I didn't think too much of it. I was tired, and since I thought it was my mom, I just went back to sleep. But then I woke up again. She was still there. This time, I sat up and said, "What do you need?" She didn't turn to look at me. She just kept crying. So I asked, "Is everything okay?" And then she disappeared. The moment she vanished, I felt this strange warmth pass through me, followed right away by an ice-cold chill. It felt like my blood pressure dropped all at once. I started sweating cold. I had never felt anything like that in my life. I pulled the blanket over my face and started praying. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually I heard my mom and my sister-in-law waking up to make lunch for my dad and my brother. I listened carefully until I recognized their voices. Only then did I feel brave enough to come out. I was still sweating when I walked into the kitchen. I told my mom, "There was a lady sitting by Mariana's bed," and I started crying. My sister-in-law grabbed my hand and asked me what the woman looked like. I told her everything I remembered: the rebozo, the blouse, the colors, the long blue skirt. Then she started crying too, but not softly. It was frantic, like I had said something impossible. That scared me, so I went back to the room. My niece woke up and asked what happened, and I just told her I'd had a nightmare. She went back to sleep. A little later, my brother came in and told me I needed to stop telling people about my dreams. He said I should only talk about them when I was alone with him or with my older sister. I still don't really know why he said that. Later, I found out my sister-in-law's mother had passed away that same afternoon. She had died wearing the exact clothes I described, and according to my sister-in-law, she always sat that way, with her rebozo covering part of her face. I didn't know what to say. I'm 30 now, and over time, I stopped having those dreams as much. Maybe because I learned they made people uncomfortable. Maybe because I was tired of causing problems without meaning to. But I still get feelings about places and people. Sometimes I just know when something doesn't feel right. I also tend to associate people with colors, and even though I'm very social, I often get headaches around others. Sometimes I feel this sudden need to cry for someone else, even when I don't understand why. My sister told me recently that when I was younger, I used to see people all the time. People no one else could see. Apparently, my parents took me to several priests because they wanted it to stop. My sister said it used to scare my siblings so badly that one of them didn't even want me sleeping near them. I grew up thinking my siblings hated me. I thought they couldn't stand being around me. Things only started getting better once I got older, around 16, or after some of them got married and moved into different seasons of their lives. But even now, I think about all of it, and I still wonder, is that normal?